They say every small town has its secrets, but Ravencross Valley's secret turned out to be buried in stone and protected by a priest with a past far deadlier than anyone imagined. What would you do if your peaceful church was targeted by a ruthless motorcycle gang? A gang whose paramilitary skills rivaled special forces. In the heart-pounding events that follow, Father Callahan Riker must decide how far he's willing to go to defend his flock. Armed with Delta Force training and unwavering faith, he faces off against foes who think nothing of kidnapping, sabotage, and tearing down sacred walls in pursuit of hidden treasure. Will Father Riker's resolve be enough to save Ravencross Valley from the Dark Tempest MC? Or will the bikers uncover a century-old secret that could plunge the town into ruin? Find out in this gripping story of courage, community, and redemption. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales and to follow the full journey from first confrontation to final showdown. Morning light fell across the rugged mountains that defined Ravencross Valley, painting the evergreens in gold and the winding river in shimmering silver. The small Montana town nestled in this valley was known for its serenity and close-knit community, a place where families went back generations and newcomers found a quiet haven. The centerpiece of the town was St. Michael's Church, its stone walls standing resolute since the late 1800s. A modest bell manor rose from the back of the church, overlooking houses that appeared almost miniature in the grand scale of pine-covered peaks. That bell had summoned townspeople for baptisms, weddings, and funerals, always ringing with the assurance that they were part of something bigger than themselves. On this particular morning, Father Callahan Riker awoke before dawn, as he did most days. He went through the same ritual: prayer, a simple breakfast of coffee and toast, and a brief silent walk around the churchyard to gather his thoughts. At first glance, he looked like a regular parish priest in his late 40s, lean, with shoulders that hinted at a youth once spent doing something far more strenuous than leading Sunday services. The lines around his eyes suggested both kindness and a capacity for deep reflection, shaped by experiences that few could imagine. Most of the town had no inkling that Father Riker had once been part of Delta Force, an elite unit of the U.S. Army. They were unaware of the fact that he had operated in some of the deadliest conflicts around the world. For he ever who picked up the good book to guide souls, he had picked up a rifle in service of his country. Over the years, Riker had chosen to share only fragments of his past. Deputy Phoenix Redwood knew there was more to him than a calm Sunday sermon, but even she didn't grasp the full extent of his training. Sister Vesper, who assisted at the church, sensed some deeper reservoir within him, perhaps from the way he moved through the building after hours, checking locks, and scanning the shadows with a vigilance that went beyond mere caution. That late summer morning, as Father Riker knelt at the altar for his daily prayer, the sharp roar of motorcycles echoed in the distance. The sound was unfamiliar, intrusive, and set the local dogs to barking. Over the past week, there had been whispers of biker sightings beyond the valley, rumors that a motorcycle club was passing through. No one thought much of it, except for the slight tension that rippled through the community whenever strangers appeared. After all, it was common for travelers to ride through the scenic roads, snapping photos of the mountain vistas. Yet there was something different about these riders, something more methodical in the way they hovered on the edges of town. Father Riker paused in his prayer. He glanced toward the tall, stained glass windows where bright sunlight poured through images of saints and symbols. The moment felt oddly ominous, as if that natural radiance were a fragile shield against a building darkness. Sister Vesper quietly entered the chapel, her footsteps soft on the old wooden floor, and informed him that Deputy Redwood was waiting outside. Even from the confines of the church, Father Riker could sense something was amiss. His years in the field had taught him to trust that instinct, a prickle of awareness that signaled when threats were nearer than they appeared. He rose, straightened his black clerical shirt, and walked to meet the deputy. The look on her face confirmed his suspicions. Trouble was coming, and whatever it was, it wouldn't be easily resolved by quoting scripture and offering gentle smiles. What the townspeople didn't realize was that they possessed a shepherd who was more than capable of defending his flock if the storm that approached demanded it. Deputy Phoenix Redwood, a tall woman with sun-streaked auburn hair, had been raised in Ravencross Valley. She joined the local sheriff's department right after finishing her training, drawn back by the magnetic pull of the mountains and a desire to protect the community she loved. She normally approached her job with measured calm, whether dealing with rowdy teenagers, lighting fireworks by the river, or the occasional petty theft in the town's few shops. However, the expression on her face this morning betrayed a simmering concern. She greeted Father Riker on the church steps, scanning the peaceful street as if expecting a threat to materialize at any moment. "They call themselves the Dark Tempest Motorcycle Club," she said without waiting for small talk. Her voice was steady but edged with tension. "From what we can gather, there are at least 30 of them cruising around the outskirts of town. More might be on the way." Father Riker nodded, recalling the faint thunder of engines he had heard earlier. From the top of the church steps, he could see a few townspeople going about their morning routines. Across the street, Zephyr Castillo opened his diner, the neon sign flickering to life. At the end of the block, Dr. Lyra Thornfield unlocked the doors to her small clinic. These were simple, good people who lived unassuming lives. The father's mind raced with possibilities, drawing on years of experience in analyzing threats. Motorcycle clubs could be harmless enthusiasts riding through scenic routes, or they could be something far darker, involved in extortion, trafficking, or orchestrating violence. "The rumors say they've been through other towns," Deputy Redwood continued, "and each time businesses ended up paying protection fees before the bikers moved on. It's an organized shakedown operation. They don't linger long, but they leave enough damage behind that folks are too scared to talk." Father Riker's features remained composed, though Sister Vesper noticed the subtle shift in his posture, that fractional tightening of muscles that betrayed alertness. "Have they made any direct contact here yet?" he asked, voice calm but purposeful. "No, not yet," the deputy replied, "but it's just a matter of time. We already have a few reports of them scouting the town last night. They took pictures of the church, the diner, the mayor's office, like they're planning something." The father glanced over his shoulder at the old church with its weathered stone walls and timeless stained glass windows. He felt the weight of its history, the generations of congregants who had been baptized, married, and mourned here. It wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of faith, community, and hope in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. He had seen enough conflict to know that symbols sometimes became targets. Sister Vesper folded her hands in silent worry. She had heard her share of whispered stories about Father Riker's background, but had never witnessed him in a genuinely threatening situation. The quiet presence he carried could turn almost electric when danger approached. She wondered if this was the beginning of that transformation. Deputy Redwood cleared her throat, her voice softening. "I came to warn you first because I know how central this church is. And well, I have a feeling they'll try to make an example out of a moral authority in town if they're looking to intimidate folks." Her gaze flickered to the crucifix above the church doors. "People respect you, Father. If you cave or show fear, they win by default." Father Riker understood what she was saying. In past conflicts, controlling the hearts and minds of a population was often more strategic than brute force. If the Dark Tempest MC planned to extort Ravencross Valley, hitting the church early and forcing capitulation would set the tone for everyone else. He gave a resolute nod. "Thank you, Deputy. Let's keep our communications open. We'll prepare, but I don't intend to let fear decide the future of this community." Mayor Tobias Drake, a man in his 50s with a receding hairline and a perpetual frown, held an emergency meeting in the modest town hall that afternoon. The building was an unassuming single-story structure with a white facade and large windows facing the main street. Word had spread quickly about the bikers sighted on the outskirts, and the conference room filled with anxious residents, from business owners to retired ranchers who had seen their share of trouble in the past. Father Riker and Sister Vesper arrived together, greeted by a din of overlapping voices. Zephyr Castillo stood beside the coffee machine telling everyone about how two men in biker cuts had parked near his diner after closing time and poked around his trash bins, like they were looking for something. Dr. Thornfield described hearing the rumble of motorcycles circling her clinic late the previous evening. Even the local high school principal joined in, sharing that a small group of riders had been seen near the football field and concession stands as if surveying potential targets. Mayor Drake called the room to order with a loud rap on the wooden podium. He looked visibly flustered, sweat beading on his temples. "All right, folks, let's have some calm." he began, clearing his throat nervously. We've heard the rumors, but let's not jump to conclusions. We need an organized response if these bikers try anything more than just passing through. Deputy Redwood stood at the back, arms folded as she observed the crowd. She caught Father Riker's eye and gave a subtle nod. They had already discussed in hushed tones how best to address the growing concern without causing panic. Father Riker was here partly to reassure the townspeople, but also to gather information. A hand shot up near the front. It belonged to a lanky man named Avery Bauman, who owned a local hardware store. Mayor, we all know they're not just passing through, Avery said. I've lived in this valley my whole life, and you can feel the tension in the air. They're coming for something. Money or intimidation? Maybe both. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Then an older rancher, Wyatt Carlyle, who had come in leaning on a cane, piped up. I'll be damned if I'm going to pay tribute to some gang. My father didn't bust his back to build this ranch just so we could be bullied by criminals. Mayor Drake raised his hands in a placating gesture. I understand your frustration, Wyatt, but we have to consider the safety of our families and businesses. He paused, his gaze drifting over the crowd until it landed on Father Riker. Father, you've always been a voice of reason. Perhaps you have some thoughts. All eyes turned to the priest, who calmly stood and inclined his head in thanks. He could sense their collective fear, a fear that, if left unchecked, could lead to hasty decisions. My friends, he began, his tone firm yet comforting, the question we should ask is, do we allow outsiders to dictate our way of life through fear, or do we stand by our convictions? Ravencross Valley has a deep history of community support. You've all proven that time and again, whether it's rebuilding after a bad storm or rallying around a family in need. He let his words settle in the charged air. Deputy Redwood has shared with me the intelligence she's gathered, and while we should indeed be cautious, we do not have to capitulate to intimidation. There are legal avenues, and there's also the power of unity. If we give in at the first sign of trouble, we risk teaching these criminals that we are easy prey. But if we stand firm and stay organized, we show them there's a line they cannot cross. The room erupted in a scattered applause and murmurs of approval, though the atmosphere remained tense. Father Riker understood that behind every nod was an undercurrent of doubt. These people were not soldiers. They were shopkeepers, farmers, teachers, and retirees. They were willing to defend what they loved, but they lacked the training or experience to face a coordinated threat. Mayor Drake, visibly relieved by the support for a united front, suggested forming a small committee to plan the next steps. Emergency contact chains, possible relocation of valuables, and a plan to inform the state police if things escalated. While the mayor spoke, Father Riker scanned the faces in the room and thought about how different they were from the hardened men he once served alongside in Delta Force. Yet he couldn't deny a stirring of pride in the way they came together. If the Dark Tempest MC believed this town would roll over, they would be severely mistaken. As evening approached, the tension in the town thickened. Residents hurried home, shops closed earlier than usual, and the once cheerful chatter outside Zephyr's diner grew muted. The talk of what if and when they come hovered in every conversation. Deputy Redwood doubled her patrols, looping slowly through every street in her cruiser. Officer Stryker Cross, her partner, did the same on the opposite end of town. They stayed in constant communication, though both knew they couldn't be everywhere at once. By nightfall, a low growl of motorcycle engines reverberated through the distance. A couple of onlookers standing near the boarded-up general store caught glimpses of riders moving in small packs. They seemed to vanish into side roads as quickly as they appeared, leaving only the echo of their engines as evidence of their presence. Father Riker, still at St. Michael's, walked through the nave of the church with Sister Vesper, checking doors and windows. The flickering light of a few candles cast dancing shadows along the walls. A hush settled in the vast interior, the kind that made any unusual sound stand out. The father's thoughts drifted to his time abroad, recalling villages torn apart by insurgent groups that used the cover of night to strike fear into unprepared towns. Back then, he had been armed with specialized weapons and advanced tactics, trained to respond with lethal force if necessary. Now he was armed with faith, moral conviction, and a side of him that still remembered how to operate efficiently under threat. In the corner of his small church office sat a locked cabinet. Inside was a wooden box bearing an etched Delta Force insignia that had faded over the years. He hadn't opened that box in quite some time. A sense of duty warred with his oath as a priest. He had hung up his weapons, vowing to dedicate himself to peace and healing. Yet he could not ignore the possibility that these criminals would force him to unearth skills he had hoped to leave buried. Sister Vesper cleared her throat softly, drawing him out of his reverie. "Father, do you think we're truly in danger? Or is this just a passing threat?" Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to maintain a calm exterior. She wasn't naive. She had heard enough about these bikers to suspect they would not leave peacefully without getting whatever they wanted. He turned to her, his expression empathetic but resolute. "I fear there will be danger, yes. But we must remember that we aren't defenseless. The people of this town have already chosen to stand together. That unity can be stronger than any intimidation these bikers can muster." Sister Vesper nodded, taking a breath that seemed to bolster her courage. In her eyes was a reflection of the same quiet determination that Father Riker carried, though her faith was born from devotion to service rather than from combat experience. She glanced at the locked cabinet but said nothing, trusting the priest to decide his own path. Outside, the wind rustled the tall pines around the church, creating a soft chorus that mixed with the distant rumble of unseen motorcycles. Even the moon seemed partially veiled, as though the valley itself braced for an encroaching darkness. Father Riker stepped outside for a moment, scanning the empty street. Porch lights flickered on and off along the row of houses. A lone dog barked in the distance, followed by another, then silence. He couldn't help but sense that the Dark Tempest MC was methodically studying the town, waiting for the moment to announce themselves in the boldest way possible. His training told him to anticipate an imminent confrontation. His faith reminded him that violence should always be a last resort. Balancing these two truths weighed heavily on him. Standing on the church steps, he lifted his gaze to the night sky and made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to protect this place and its people. Whether that meant offering prayers or fighting back, he would not let Ravencross Valley fall. Close to midnight, under a canopy of stars mostly obscured by drifting clouds, a line of motorcycles finally roared onto Main Street. The thunder of their engines shattered the valley's stillness. People peered nervously from behind curtains. A few porch lights flickered out, a sign that residents preferred not to invite trouble by advertising their presence. Leading the pack was Talon Raptor Steelhawk, a tall man with a lean, muscular build and a face marked by a deep scar running from his left temple to just above his lip. He wore a heavy leather vest adorned with patches that spoke of battles. Some might have been with rival gangs, others perhaps in distant wars. Behind him, a cadre of riders, each with their own monikers and insignias, fanned out in a show of force. Over the roar, one could almost pick out distinct personalities. Avalanche, a behemoth of a man rumored to have been a private military contractor. Titan, with eyes that seemed too calm, scanning everything as though he were a machine. And Wraith, a silent rider whose precision and posture hinted at a past in special operations. The motorcycles idled in front of St. Michael's Church. The swirling headlights illuminated the stone facade and the big wooden doors. Father Riker, alerted by Sister Vesper's urgent whisper, stepped outside to find the entire congregation of steel and leather facing the church. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had stood before lethal forces in far-flung deserts and jungles, but seeing them invade this sacred, peaceful space felt different. Raptor killed his engine, and the sudden silence amplified the tension. One by one, the others followed suit until the night was once again eerily quiet, save for the faint hiss of cooling metal. Raptor dismounted, taking a slow, deliberate step toward Father Riker. Under the dim glow of the streetlight, the scar on his face caught the light in a jagged reflection. "We hear this place could use some protection," he said, voice low and gravelly. "World's dangerous these days, churches especially." Father Riker remained calm. He clasped his hands in front of him, the white of his clerical collar catching Raptor's eye. "God's house is always open to those who seek peace," he replied evenly. "But I sense you're not here to pray." A few of the other bikers chuckled. Avalanche cracked his knuckles, the echo unnerving in the stillness. Wraith took a step forward, scanning the church exterior. His eyes moved in a practiced sweep, much like Father Riker's had earlier, revealing the detail-oriented mind of a trained professional. Sister Vesper stood just inside the doorway, her face pale but her stance resolute. Raptor spread his arms wide as if presenting a benevolent offer. Father, we're not unreasonable. We roll into towns from time to time to ensure everything runs smooth and no one gets hurt. A toothy grin spread across his scarred face. We usually ask for a small donation. Let's call it a sign of good faith. Then we make sure that no harm comes to places like your church. Father Riker felt the weight of that implication. He had heard countless threats in different languages, different contexts, but they all boiled down to the same concept: pay or suffer. He inhaled slowly, reminding himself to keep control. And if I politely decline your offer? For a moment, Raptor's men tensed, as if anticipating a direct confrontation. But the leader merely chuckled, turning toward the others. Hear that, boys? The good father wants to decline our generosity. Another wave of quiet laughter followed, though there was a steely undertone to it. Raptor's gaze shifted back to the priest. Well, we'd hate to see a beautiful building like this ruined by accidents. Deputy Redwood, who had arrived moments earlier and parked her cruiser discreetly on the side, stepped forward. Her hand hovered near her holstered sidearm. This is private property, and extortion is a crime, she said, her voice carrying the authority of law enforcement, even though she was outnumbered. Wraith, hearing her speak, locked eyes with Redwood. Father Riker could sense a strange recognition flicker across the biker's face, as if Redwood's stance or the way she carried herself revealed her own form of training. Father Riker made a mental note of that exchange, realizing these were not ordinary thugs. They had the posture, discipline, and composure reminiscent of military or paramilitary backgrounds. Before tensions escalated further, Raptor stepped back, raising both hands in a mocking show of surrender. We don't want to be rude guests. We'll be around tomorrow. You can rethink our offer. With a sardonic tilt of his head, he added, pray on it. Then as swiftly as they arrived, the bikers mounted up, engines roaring to life. They peeled away, leaving only the echo of thunder in their wake. The departure of the Dark Tempest MC brought a momentary sense of relief, but Father Riker knew it was merely the calm before the storm. He and Sister Vesper stepped back inside the church. Deputy Redwood followed, her jaw clenched with frustration. She had reached for her radio earlier, only to find that the signal was strangely spotty, as if someone were interfering with the town's communications. Did you notice their tactics? Redwood asked, glancing around to ensure they were out of earshot of any curious passersby. They arrived together like a coordinated force, then retreated as a single unit. No scuffles, no property damage, just a very clear message. Father Riker nodded. That's exactly why I'm certain they have a plan. I've seen groups like this in far more volatile areas. It's an intimidation tactic, testing the waters to see how we respond. My guess is they're gathering information on the town's key figures, identifying who might stand up to them. Sister Vesper paced near the front pews, the usually peaceful church setting unable to calm her. Father, do you really think they'll come after us directly if we refuse to pay? He exchanged a quick glance with Deputy Redwood. I hope not, but bullies rarely walk away empty-handed. If they're willing to make these threats in front of law enforcement, it suggests they're either extremely arrogant or very sure of their advantage. Either way, we have to be ready. Redwood checked her phone, noting the poor reception. I'll try to get a hold of Officer Cross and see if he can keep an eye on them. But if they have equipment to jam signals, we might need to rely on landlines and face-to-face coordination. She paused, eyeing Father Riker carefully. Should I also call the county sheriff and request backup? For a moment, Father Riker considered the implications. Additional law enforcement could either deter the bikers or provoke them into more aggressive moves. Let's hold off for now. Let's gather more intelligence on them before escalating. We don't want a confrontation that puts civilians at risk. Sister Vesper nodded, relief and worry mixed on her face. I'll get word to some of the parishioners, see if anyone has noticed suspicious activities or unusual visitors in their neighborhoods. Deputy Redwood gave a tight-lipped smile. That'd be helpful. It's not just about watching the roads. These guys might have plans for sabotage, infiltration, or other methods of pressure. When Redwood left to resume patrol, Father Riker found himself alone with his thoughts in the quiet chapel. He paced the aisle, one hand brushing against the back of each pew, as though seeking the courage that once came naturally in the field. In those days, he had squads, advanced weaponry, and the surety of a mission statement. Here, the mission was to protect a peaceful town that scarcely knew how to handle a threat of this magnitude. His gaze fell upon the crucifix at the far end. Protecting innocence was something he had done in uniform many times before. The difference here was that he was no longer a soldier. He was a priest, called to shepherd souls, to mend hearts rather than break them. But as he had learned so often, the line between protecting and pacifying could blur when dealing with aggressors who thrived on fear. Night crept on, and Father Riker eventually locked the church doors, though he knew a locked door wouldn't stop determined criminals. Before heading to his modest rectory adjacent to the church, he paused at that locked cabinet, hand hovering near the key. He thought of the Delta Force insignia on that box. Turning away, he decided not to open it yet. If the situation worsened, he would revisit that choice. For now, he prayed for guidance, hoping there might be a peaceful way to guide the community through the trial that was surely coming. Sunrise came with a sobering quiet that felt like the hush before a battle. Father Riker woke early, more out of habit than restlessness. The tension he felt was akin to the final hours before a critical operation, when everything was in place but the actual conflict had yet to begin. He walked through the church and paused by the stained glass windows, watching the morning light filter through depictions of saints and angels. It seemed surreal that a place so radiant it could be shadowed by the threat of violence. By the time he stepped outside, Sister Vesper had already assembled a small group of parishioners in the courtyard. They were discussing what they had observed overnight. A few had seen unfamiliar men on motorcycles circling their blocks, taking photos of properties and license plates, and loitering near closed businesses. One man claimed he saw a biker scanning the outskirts of a local ranch with binoculars. Father Riker listened intently to each account, noting the patterns. These were classic reconnaissance moves, gathering data, identifying vulnerabilities, and more than likely, deciding whom to pressure first. Nearby, Deputy Redwood and Officer Cross approached, looking as if they had been up all night. "Morning, Father," Redwood said, her voice low and cautious. "We've had half a dozen calls from worried residents. No overt criminal activity yet, but we're seeing the same pattern. Watching, waiting, building fear." Officer Cross, a stocky man with sharp eyes, took off his hat to wipe sweat from his brow. Even in the crisp mountain air, the weight of the situation made him perspire. "We tried to follow them, but they move in small packs. They peel off in different directions whenever we get too close. It's like they've got someone directing them via radio." Sister Vesper approached holding a notepad. "We're compiling addresses of everyone who reported a sighting. It might help us figure out which areas they're targeting." Father Riker glanced at the notes. Ranches, key businesses like the diner, the clinic, the gas station, and even the local school. "They're making sure they cover every aspect of the town's infrastructure," he observed. "It's as if they're planning to cut us off at our most vital points." A short distance away, Mayor Drake's car pulled up. The mayor emerged looking more haggard than ever. He made his way over to the group with hurried strides. "The city council is in an uproar," he said, voice trembling slightly. "Some of them want to pay whatever fee these bikers demand just to keep the peace. Others are furious at the very idea of capitulating. We're not built for a fight, Father, you know that." Father Riker nodded, carefully weighing his next words. "I understand their concerns, Mayor, but giving in to extortion only invites more problems. They'll come back the next time they need money or decide this valley is theirs to exploit." Mayor Drake let out a breath. "I don't like it any more than you do, but I have to consider the safety of our citizens. If we refuse and things escalate, we could be looking at vandalism, arson, worse." His gaze flickered towards Sister Vesper and the small cluster of parishioners. "I'm not sure this town can handle that kind of violence." Before Father Riker could reply, the distant roar of engines announced the bikers' daytime arrival. It was quieter than the display the previous night, just a handful of riders, possibly scouts. They passed along the main road, slowing enough to lock eyes with anyone who dared watch them. One biker gestured to the church as if silently reminding everyone of their last visit. Then, just as quickly, they accelerated and disappeared around a bend. Deputy Redwood's hand went to her hip, reflexively checking her sidearm. If they're this blatant, it means they're confident. They know we're on edge, and they're pushing us to see how far we'll bend before we break. Father Riker's gaze was as unyielding as the church's stone walls. Then we need to show them we won't break, he said quietly. Around him, the townspeople seemed to draw closer together, united by an unspoken resolve. In the pit of his stomach, Riker felt that same sensation he used to get when a mission was about to cross the point of no return. He just hoped his vow of peace could hold out a little longer. As midday approached, the Dark Tempest MC made their next move. A group of bikers, led by Raptor himself, cruised back into town, parking their motorcycles in a neat line across from Zephyr's diner. Their presence was like a magnet for uneasy stares from locals. Zephyr, who had been cleaning tables, froze when he saw them through the large front window. With a trembling hand, he removed his apron and stepped outside to confront them. Raptor beckoned him over, resting casually on his bike, as if he owned the street. "Nice place you got here," he said, glancing at the diner's neon sign. "Would hate for something to happen to it." Zephyr mustered the courage to speak. "We're just trying to make a living, man. Nobody wants trouble." His voice trembled slightly, belying the bravado he tried to project. "Neither do we," Raptor replied, an easy smirk on his face. "But peace costs money. Maybe we come back later, see how generous you can be." Before Zephyr could retort, Dr. Thornfield emerged from her clinic, which was just 2 doors down. She was a petite woman, but her eyes flashed with indignation at the sight of the bikers. "This is a respectable town," she said firmly, pointing a slender finger at Raptor. "You can't just walk in and demand people's hard-earned money." Raptor laughed, nodding to one of his men, Cypher, a wiry figure who seemed more technologically inclined, fiddling with what looked like a custom tablet mounted on his handlebars. "Lady, we're not demanding. We're offering a service, protection, from the big bad world out there." He swung his leg off his bike in a fluid motion, and you never know when the world might come crashing down on a small place like this. Officer Cross, who had been patrolling nearby, arrived on the scene. He kept a hand near his holster, but did not draw his weapon. "Back it up, folks," he warned, voice firm. "We don't want any trouble, and extortion is a crime." Raptor turned, regarding Cross with a predatory gaze. "Is it extortion, officer, or just a friendly arrangement? After all, this town has no real means of defense, does it?" He paused, letting the rhetorical question hang in the air. "I'd wager your entire police department consists of what? 2 patrol cars and a handful of officers?" By then, a small crowd had gathered at a cautious distance. Among them was Willow Drake, the mayor's daughter, who'd been running errands. She recorded the scene on her phone, defiant energy in her eyes. Raptor shot her a glance, but didn't seem worried about being filmed. His confidence bordered on arrogance, as though he believed any video evidence would be irrelevant once he and his crew finished whatever they planned to do. Zephyr, noticing how the confrontation was escalating, decided to speak up. "Why don't we talk inside, have a coffee, and settle this without causing a scene?" His voice quivered slightly, but there was a note of bravery in the offer. Raptor chuckled, exchanging amused looks with his men. "Coffee sounds nice. I'll take mine black." He led the way into the diner, leaving his bike idling on the curb. Cypher and another biker, Titan, followed. They moved with unsettling composure, scanning the room as though assessing threats and exits. Officer Cross kept a watchful eye, staying close as they entered. On the sidewalk, the bystanders began to disperse, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire of whatever was happening. Dr. Thornfield lingered by the diner's window, her medical mind already picturing worst-case scenarios if violence broke out. She touched her phone, debating whether to call for backup immediately or wait for the situation to evolve. In the end, the bikers merely sat down at a booth, taking their coffee and exchanging occasional smirks with one another. Raptor made no further threats, but his presence alone was enough to convey the message. The Dark Tempest MC was here, and the town was living on borrowed time until they paid what was demanded. Out on the street, Father Riker arrived just in time to see them sipping their coffee with smug satisfaction, and he understood that lines were being drawn more clearly by the hour. Word traveled fast, especially in a small town already on high alert. By late afternoon, Mayor Drake had convened another emergency meeting with key community members, this time in his own office at the modest municipal building. Father Riker, Dr. Thornfield, Zephyr Castillo, Deputy Redwood, and Officer Cross were all in attendance. Even Willow Drake stood by the window, arms folded, her phone at the ready in case she needed to document any new threats. The mayor began with a heavy sigh, removing his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. So they've officially demanded we pay them for protection. Or else. He cast a look around the room as if seeking any sign of optimism. I'll admit, their numbers and confidence are unsettling. The council is already at each other's throats over whether to pay up or stand firm. Deputy Redwood cut in, her tone clipped with frustration. Paying them is not a solution. It only emboldens them to keep coming back for more. We've seen that in other towns. She turned to Father Riker. You've been around groups like this before, haven't you, Father? In your previous life? There was a moment of awkward silence. Not everyone in the room knew the full extent of Father Riker's military background, just that he had served. He inclined his head slightly. I've encountered paramilitary organizations, insurgent groups, and criminal syndicates overseas. The fundamental tactics are similar: intimidation, control, and systematic exploitation. If we cave in, the next demand will be bigger, and so on. We'll never regain our autonomy. Zephyr scratched the back of his head, remembering the uneasy conversation in his diner. Some towns might have tried standing up to them. How did that go? Father Riker spread his hands. From my understanding, those towns either eventually paid or relied on outside help that came too late. In some cases, the bikers moved on quickly after extorting a lump sum. In others, they set up a longer operation. He paused, letting his words sink in. But Raven Cross Valley is unique. We have a chance to come together, organize, and protect ourselves before it escalates. Willow Drake, leaning against the windowsill, spoke up. I filmed them in the diner earlier. Maybe we can use this footage to get higher authorities involved faster. She held up her phone, displaying a shaky video of Raptor and his men taking their seats. If we can prove they're threatening us, we might get federal attention. Deputy Redwood gave a slight nod. It's worth trying. I can file a more urgent report, see if we can bypass the usual red tape. But we should be prepared for a slow response. You know how bureaucracy works. Mayor Drake exhaled, the lines on his forehead deepening. So what do we do in the meantime, while waiting for any outside help that may or may not arrive? It's not like we have a militia. We've got a handful of police officers, Father Riker, a few capable folks. But we can't exactly arm everyone. Father Riker's gaze flickered to the floor. His mind drifted to the locked cabinet and the wooden box inside. He had some training that could help organize a civilian defense, but the moral complexity weighed heavily on him. Leading people into potential violence felt like stepping back into a life he wanted to leave behind. Yet walking away and allowing bullies to terrorize the innocent was equally unthinkable. After a strained silence, Zephyr cleared his throat. I could keep an eye on the bikers when they are at the diner, listen in on their conversations, see if they slip up about their plans. Maybe we can gather intel. Dr. Thornfield chimed in. I can do the same at the clinic. If any of them get injured or need medical assistance, I might hear something useful. Mayor Drake nodded, relief flickering in his tired eyes. All right, let's do that. Let's keep everything as normal as possible. Don't provoke them, don't pay them, but gather information. Meanwhile, Redwood, file that urgent request for assistance. Everyone in the room agreed, albeit reluctantly. They parted ways with the uneasy realization that they were all stepping into uncharted territory. Father Riker lingered, giving a final glance at the mayor, who sat slumped in his chair. Tobias, he said gently, dropping the formal title, we'll do everything we can to protect this community, but we must stay united. Mayor Drake forced a small, weary smile. I know. Thank you, Father. Outside, the sun was already dipping behind the mountains, casting long shadows through Ravencross Valley. For the first time since the day began, Father Riker felt a chill that had nothing to do with the descending night air. The bikers had come, declared their intentions, and shown they weren't afraid of local law enforcement. The clock was ticking, and the next move would likely belong to the Dark Tempest MC. That evening, Father Riker found himself alone in the church rectory, a single lamp illuminating the room. The day's tension had left him both mentally exhausted and quietly resolute. On the desk lay a stack of notes and phone numbers, contact information for parishioners who might volunteer for watch groups, suggestions for safer routes for children walking home from school, and a list of local businesses that might be vulnerable to intimidation. He looked out the window, the moon just peeking over the jagged mountain ridges, bathing the valley in pale light. In the back of his mind, he heard echoes of old training: reconnaissance, threat assessment, perimeter security, contingency plans. The parallels between leading a mission and shepherding this town through a crisis were stark. Yet one was a mission of lethal engagement, while the other was a mission of communal protection. His phone buzzed, a text from Deputy Redwood. No sightings in the last hour, all quiet so far. Father Riker typed a quick thank you before letting out a slow breath. Quiet could be a good sign, or it could be the prelude to something decisive. Finally, his gaze settled on the locked cabinet in the corner of the room. He stood, crossed the floor in a few brisk steps, and retrieved the small key from his pocket. The lock clicked open, revealing the polished wooden box he had once vowed never to handle again. Hesitation danced in his chest as he traced the faint Delta Force insignia with a calloused fingertip. Inside the box lay remnants of another life: old dog tags, a folded set of camouflage fatigues that still bore his surname patch, a weathered photograph of his unit from years ago, and beneath these personal items, a small black case that contained his sidearm, a reliable piece of hardware from his service days. He gently lifted the weapon, feeling the weight he hadn't felt in ages. The metal was cool against his palm, the grip familiar. His mind filled with flashbacks. He recalled a night mission in a faraway desert, the weight of body armor, the sound of rotor blades overhead. The adrenaline, the camaraderie, the moral burden of violence, even when justified. Closing his eyes, he said a silent prayer, asking for guidance to use whatever gifts and training he had only in defense of the innocent, never out of vengeance or aggression. Setting the gun down, he closed the black case but left it easily accessible in the wooden box. This was not a choice he made lightly, nor was it one he wanted to broadcast to the town. He wasn't planning to turn St. Michael's Church into a fortress, but if the day came when the Dark Tempest MC forced his hand, he would be ready to act. He locked the cabinet again, slipping the key into a drawer. Then he bowed his head, hands clasped, and let out a long, trembling exhale. The father understood the path he was taking was one of delicate balance. Accepting the potential for violence to protect his flock meant flirting with the very life he had renounced. A few minutes later, he extinguished the lamp and walked the silent halls of the church, pausing at the altar. The hush of the sanctuary settled around him, offering a moment of solace. Stained glass windows, now dark against the night, still told stories of saints and martyrs who faced persecutions of all kinds. Father Riker found comfort in knowing many who walked before him had also grappled with moral quandaries. He knelt, whispered a prayer for peace, courage, and discernment. Then he prayed for the souls of those in the Dark Tempest MC, for even they were not beyond redemption. Only after this final reflection did he rise and retire for the night, mind resolved on forging a path that, if need be, could unite the soldier he once was with the priest he had become. A soft rain drizzled over Ravencross Valley by dawn, leaving the streets glistening beneath low-hanging clouds. The weather matched the somber mood that had settled over the townspeople. As Father Callahan Riker stepped onto the church's front steps, water droplets beaded on the stone walkway before him, reflecting the faint glow of the street lamps that had yet to shut off. He carried with him a sense of fatigue. His sleep had been fitful, dominated by anxious thoughts about the Dark Tempest MC and the moral weight of decisions he might soon have to make. Yet even in the gloom of a drizzling morning, he couldn't ignore the subtle changes in the town's atmosphere. Where children used to ride their bikes freely, parents now hovered protectively. The usual friendly waves among neighbors had turned to curt nods or half-hearted greetings, as though no one had time for pleasantries with the threat of extortion hanging overhead. Windows that once displayed flower pots and cheerful curtains were now dark, blinds partially drawn, as if warding off some lurking menace. Sister Vesper had arrived early to prepare for the day's service. She found Father Riker already outside, scanning the silent streets from the church steps. She held a large black umbrella over both their heads, her expression a mix of resolve and lingering worry. "Deputy Redwood called," she said softly. "She and Officer Cross are doing another circuit of the outer roads. They haven't spotted any bikers yet, but it's only been a few hours since they last saw them near the old railroad tracks." Father Riker nodded, mind drifting to the farmland beyond the main town. The rusted tracks, once busy bringing miners and supplies in the late 1800s, were rarely used now except by local freight. If the bikers were scouting that area, they might be looking for ways in and out of Ravencross Valley that circumvented the main highway. "Tell me something, sister," he said, voice low. "Do you recall if there's an access road or an old path branching off near those tracks?" Sister Vesper furrowed her brow, thinking back to the local lore she'd picked up over the years. "There's a story about an old mining route that runs parallel to the railroad, maybe half a mile away. Some folks say it connects to a hidden network of tunnels under the church, but that's likely just a legend." She smiled faintly, though her eyes held a flicker of concern. "You know how people talk in these parts. Every old path leads to treasure or ghosts." Her mention of tunnels made Father Riker pause. He recalled a conversation with an elderly parishioner months ago who claimed his grandfather had worked on the original foundation of St. Michael's Church. According to that story, there were subterranean chambers built for storage or shelter. Nobody knew for certain. Riker had dismissed it as folklore at the time, but given the circumstances, it no longer seemed so far-fetched. Before Sister Vesper could say more, a pair of headlights cut through the misty rain, rolling slowly down the road that flanked the church. They both tensed, but the vehicle turned out to be a local farmer's pickup, stacked with bales of hay. He gave them a half wave as he passed, and they exhaled in relief. Still, the jolt of tension lingered. "Let's go inside," Father Riker said, gently steering Sister Vesper back through the church doors. "We have parishioners arriving soon for morning prayers. We'll do what needs to be done afterward, maybe a more thorough check of the church basement. See if there is any truth to these stories about hidden chambers." Sister Vesper nodded, closing her umbrella. As they headed down the aisle, the soft patter of rain against the stained glass windows provided a haunting soundtrack to the uncertainty looming over the town. It felt as if Ravencross Valley was bracing itself for a pivotal moment, one that might crack open old secrets buried in both ground and memory. And Father Riker thought grimly, those secrets might be exactly what the Dark Tempest MC was after. Later that morning, after the last of the faithful had left the church, Father Riker and Sister Vesper convened with Deputy Redwood in a small side office. The deputy removed her damp jacket, hanging it on the back of a wooden chair, and spread a map of Ravencross Valley across a worn desk. It detailed every major road, minor pathway, and historical site. Sticky notes and ink scribbles indicated points of interest regarding the bikers' sightings. Redwood tapped an area on the map where the old railroad tracks bent to follow the curve of the valley's southern edge. "We spotted about 6 riders here last night," she explained. "They were out of sight from the main highway. After a few minutes, they cut their engines and started rolling the bikes by hand so they wouldn't be heard." Sister Vesper leaned in, her finger tracing a faint line branching off from the tracks. "There's an unpaved road here. It leads into the forest. That's probably how they avoided being seen by your patrol until the last second." Father Riker studied the terrain features. The southwestern portion of the valley sloped upward into rugged hills, dotted with pine trees and craggy rock formations. If one knew the land well, it would be easy to slip in and out undetected. "It's not just random exploration," he observed, straightening. "They're methodically scouting. They either want to set up a perimeter around the town, or they're searching for something." Deputy Redwood's face darkened. "Searching for what? It's not like we're known for large cash reserves or valuable real estate. Sure, the farmland is decent, and some folks have old family heirlooms, but nothing that would warrant this level of organized intel gathering. They could hold the town hostage for money, but I feel there's more going on." Father Riker exchanged a glance with Sister Vesper. He recalled the rumors about the church's foundations, the mysterious tunnels. "I've heard there might be hidden spaces under St. Michael's, though I've never found anything more than a normal basement. If that's true, maybe some piece of local history is at stake. Or it could be a vantage point they believe is ideal for controlling the town. The deputy folded her arms, a skeptical frown creeping onto her face. Hidden spaces? Are we talking buried treasure or something else? A flicker of memory surfaced in Father Riker's mind. The conversation with the elderly parishioner who claimed there were structural blueprints from the 1880s locked away in the county archives. He had never bothered to verify it, assuming it was local lore. But now every rumor seemed worthy of consideration. It might be worth investigating, he said. At the very least, let's see if we can track down those old blueprints. If there's a subterranean system, it could explain their interest. A hidden route or hidden cache might be enough to lure a group like this. Redwood nodded, sliding the map to the side. I'll check with the county records office. Maybe they have something on file about the church's construction. Meanwhile, I'll ask Officer Cross to keep patrolling the southwestern edge of the valley. If the bikers are snooping around there, I want them to know they can't do it undetected. A moment of tense silence followed as each weighed what might be hidden beneath the church. The possibility of old contraband, silver from the defunct mines, or even something more sinister began to take shape in their imaginations. It was evident that the threat was no longer limited to intimidation for protection fees. Let's just hope we're not uncovering a bigger danger than we already face, Sister Vesper murmured. Her eyes drifted to the closed office door, beyond which stood the rest of St. Michael's, an edifice intended for worship and solace, never meant to be the epicenter of a high-stakes mystery. By midday, word spread that the Dark Tempest MC was roaming the town again, this time in smaller groups of 2 or 3. They prowled the streets at a languid pace as though they owned the place. Locals gave them a wide berth, ducking into stores or pulling over to the curb to let them pass. At Zephyr's Diner, a handful of bikers lingered inside, nursing cups of coffee for an absurdly long time, their presence a constant reminder that this was no ordinary road trip. In a corner booth, Raptor himself sat with Avalanche and Wraith, the trio conferring in low voices. Every now and then, Raptor's gaze roved around the diner, locking onto any resident who dared look his way. The message was clear. The Dark Tempest MC was in control. Though they hadn't fired a single shot or broken a single window, psychological warfare bled into every aspect of daily life. Zephyr busied himself behind the counter, cleaning dishes that didn't need cleaning. Dr. Thornfield, seated at a small table near the window, tried to appear immersed in a medical journal. In truth, she was listening intently for any scrap of conversation that might reveal the bikers' plans. Outside, Officer Cross pretended to write a ticket to a parked car, effectively stationing himself within eyeshot of the diner. At one point, Avalanche stood and ambled toward the counter. The man was enormous, easily 6'5", with shoulders that looked capable of knocking down walls. He placed his hands on the polished surface, leaning forward. "Nice place," he said, voice raking with a low timbre. "Kinda quiet, though. You must not get much business." Zephyr forced a polite smile. "We get by fine, thanks. It's a small town, you know how it is." Avalanche responded with a half shrug. Sure, but if you want to keep it that way, safe and all, you should think about our offer." He let the statement hang before returning to the booth. The tension swelled like a balloon about to pop. Meanwhile, across town, Mayor Drake paced in his office. He had been fielding calls from panicked citizens all day, store owners asking if they should close up shop, ranchers worried about what would happen if they refused to pay the bikers a dime, and parents afraid their kids would be harassed on the way home from school. The mayor felt cornered, uncertain whether to capitulate or hold firm. In desperation, he placed a call to the county sheriff's office, only to be told that with limited resources, they couldn't promise immediate assistance. They suggested he gather all evidence, document every threat, and remain patient. When the mayor hung up, he realized his hands were shaking. He glanced at the clock on the wall, already well into the afternoon, and the day felt like it had stretched for weeks. On his desk sat a photograph of himself and his daughter Willow, taken years ago during a county fair. He picked it up, heart heavy. Willow was a grown woman now, fiercely independent, but he still felt responsible for her safety. If the bikers ever decided to retaliate against him personally, she could become a target. A knock sounded on the office door. Willow stepped in, having overheard her father's phone conversation. "Dad, she said softly. "We can't handle this alone. Have you talked to Father Riker? He seems to have some experience with dangerous people." Mayor Drake set the photo down. "Yes, I have. He's doing everything he can, but he's not law enforcement. He's a priest, for heaven's sake." Willow approached him, setting a hand on his shoulder. "From what I've heard, he was a soldier first. Don't underestimate him." Her words struck an uneasy chord. Mayor Drake sighed, realizing that the only chance they had might involve trusting an unconventional approach, relying on a man who balanced faith and a warrior's instincts, a man who might be the only person in town capable of facing the dark tempest MC on their own terms. Back at St. Michael's, Father Riker and Sister Vesper ventured down into the church basement after morning prayers had concluded. The basement was a labyrinth of storage rooms containing holiday decorations, boxes of old records, and shelves of aging hymnals. Dimly lit by a single string of overhead bulbs, the corridors felt colder than the rest of the building. A faint smell of mildew hung in the air, mingled with the scent of old, dust-laden paper. They started their search methodically. Father Riker opened each door, shining a flashlight around the cramped spaces. He half expected to find nothing more than an endless array of forgotten church relics, but the possibility of hidden chambers kept him alert. The sense of stepping deeper into old, possibly secret territory nagged at him. "How far back do these records go?" he asked, opening one box and leafing through the yellowed ledgers. Sister Vesper crouched by a stack of older crates. "I've found ones dated to the late 18, around the time the church was built. But they're incomplete, like pages might be missing. Or maybe they're stored somewhere else." She brushed her hands clean of dust and moved on to a wooden trunk with rusted latches. Inside the trunk, they found an odd collection of handwritten documents, birth records, baptism notes, and some financial ledgers referencing large donations made in silver bullion. Father Riker set his flashlight on the ground, splaying the beam upward so he could study them more carefully. "Silver? That has to connect to the old mines around here." He flipped a few more pages. The ledger entries abruptly stopped, as if someone had ceased record-keeping midway through a series of transactions. Sister Vesper, reading over his shoulder, tapped a particular entry dated 1888. "Look at the amounts. This is more silver than a typical tithe, and it's not from any named donor, just coded initials." A shiver ran through Father Riker. He'd heard rumors of large-scale silver smuggling in these mountains decades ago, but that was hardly unusual for a boom-and-bust mining region. The question was, why would that interest a modern motorcycle gang? Could they be after something that was never accounted for? He mused aloud. If there was silver or something else valuable hidden beneath the church, that would explain their thorough scouting. He replaced the documents in the trunk and rose, scanning the perimeter of the basement. "There's something else about the construction of this foundation that's always struck me as different. The walls are thicker than they need to be, and if you look at the outside, the stone is from a quarry that's miles from here. Unusual for a church of this age." Sister Vesper looked around, the hair on her arms prickling. "You think there could be a sealed-off portion of the basement?" Before Father Riker could answer, they heard footsteps overhead. Startled, they exchanged glances. It was unlikely to be a parishioner at this hour. Father Riker motioned for Sister Vesper to remain quiet. He switched off his flashlight, plunging them into near darkness, save for the dim glow from the overhead bulbs. The footsteps crossed the nave of the church, paused near the stairs leading down to the basement, and then retreated. Father Riker exhaled softly, edging toward the basement door to listen more carefully. After a moment, the footsteps faded, and the old wooden doors at the church's front entrance creaked shut. When he was certain they were alone, he flicked his flashlight back on. "No need to panic," he whispered, forcing a calm tone. "But I think we should be careful. We've got to lock the church more securely when we come down here, especially if the bikers are sneaking around for hidden passages or anything else." Sister Vesper nodded, her heart still hammering in her chest. "Agreed. For now, let's keep these old ledgers between us, Redwood, and the mayor. The less attention we draw to the possibility of hidden valuables, the better." Together, they gathered the documents and carefully replaced them in the trunk, making a mental note of exactly which ones they needed to analyze later. The distinct sense of unraveling a mystery only deepened the undercurrent of danger. Neither Father Riker nor Sister Vesper could shake the feeling that an even larger conspiracy was woven into these silent walls, waiting to be discovered. That afternoon, Deputy Redwood received a call from the county records office. Her request for any documentation on St. Michael's Church had yielded interesting results. There were indeed original blueprints from the late 1880s, complete with notes on subterranean expansions that were never fully explained. Redwood wasted no time in relaying this information to Father Riker, urging him and Sister Vesper to join her at the modest county archives, an hour's drive beyond the valley's main limits. The sun broke through the clouds by the time the trio climbed into Redwood's patrol SUV, leaving behind a watchful Officer Cross to patrol the town. Father Riker sat in the front passenger seat, Sister Vesper in the back, each holding a sense of urgency as they embarked on the winding road out of Ravencross Valley. During the drive, Redwood explained what she'd gleaned from her brief conversation with the archivist. It seems the church's founding priest was also tied financially to the local mine owners. There are records of large donations and shipments of silver that never quite add up. The archivist mentioned something about a footnote referencing a lower vault under the main floor, though it wasn't detailed on the official blueprint. Father Riker couldn't help but recall the abrupt ending in the church ledger that mentioned massive silver donations. So the official blueprint might omit details of that vault, or maybe it was intentionally kept off the record. That could be what the Dark Tempest MC is after. Sister Vesper leaned forward from the back seat. But how would they know about a hidden vault if it's not on any official plan? Redwood navigated a sharp curve in the road, the tires kicking up gravel. They might have found references in old mining documents, or maybe they got wind of local rumors. These guys appear well-funded, well-coordinated, and definitely more than just a weekend biker club. If there's even a whisper of treasure or contraband from the mining era, that might be enough to draw them in. The hour-long ride passed with sporadic conversation. Each occupant of the SUV lost in thoughts of how the pieces were falling into place, and what new danger they might face if the Dark Tempest MC learned they were on the same investigative trail. They arrived at the county archives, a squat brick building with tall windows that stared blankly onto a quiet street. Inside, the musty smell of old paper and aging leather book bindings enveloped them. An older woman with thin-rimmed glasses, Mrs. Greenwood, according to the plaque on her desk, met them with a polite but inquisitive smile. Mrs. Greenwood led them down a narrow hallway lined with towering shelves of documents. "We don't get many visitors interested in church architecture," she remarked, flipping on additional overhead lights that buzzed. "I've pulled what I could find on St. Michael's, plus some peripheral documents about the town's mining history." Father Riker gratefully accepted the stack of folders. Each was labeled with spidery handwriting, dated from the 1880s through the early 1900s. Deputy Redwood opened one and immediately found a survey map that included the land where the church now stood. A faint annotation read, "Proposed foundation with subterranean annex," though the annex area was left blank, merely indicated by dotted lines. Curiosity piqued, Sister Vesper carefully turned the pages of another folder. She paused, brow furrowing, then held it up for the others to see. It was a ledger listing shipments of silver ore, addressed to SM Church over a 3-month period. "This matches the timeline in that trunk we found at St. Michael's," she said softly. They spent another 2 hours combing through the records, discovering cryptic references to a vault sealed due to structural safety concerns. Each new paper seemed to confirm that the church had been built with more than spiritual sustenance in mind. Mrs. Greenwood observed them from a distance, occasionally offering to fetch more boxes. When they finally emerged from the archives, the late afternoon sun felt jarringly bright, as if the world outside was oblivious to the dark secrets they'd just uncovered. Father Riker clutched the copies they were allowed to make, scanning their contents one more time. The half-buried hints of silver shipments, sealed passages, and coded references to a hidden vault filled him with an unsettling conviction. The Dark Tempest MC had come to Ravencross Valley with a plan, and they were closer to finding whatever lay beneath St. Michael's than anyone realized. News of the trio's trip to the county archives spread quickly among the few who were in the know. Mayor Drake, Officer Cross, and Dr. Thornfield. That evening they met in the church basement, now an impromptu war room, to discuss their findings. Copies of the old blueprints and ledgers littered a long folding table set up near rows of stacked chairs. A single fluorescent light hummed overhead, casting a stark glow that made every expression appear more solemn. Mayor Drake rubbed his temples, visibly stressed. I've heard rumors of hidden silver under this valley my entire life. Some folks said the church was used as a smuggling front during the old mining rush, but I always dismissed it as tall tales. Now I'm not so sure. Father Riker pointed to a section on the blueprint copies. Here's the main floor, the basement we've seen, and this dotted outline which indicates there may be a sealed vault. Notice the thickness of these walls. He traced a finger along what appeared to be an interior barrier. If the builders wanted to hide something, they did a thorough job. There's no obvious entrance from the current basement layout. Officer Cross leaned over the table, arms folded. If the bikers are ex-military or have special training, they might have the expertise to locate or breach a sealed vault once they confirm it exists. We need to figure out if there's another way in, maybe from outside. Sister Vesper flipped through the old ledger copies. Based on these shipments, they were bringing in a lot of silver, more than a typical donation, even for a wealthy parish. And then it abruptly stopped. No records of it being shipped out. A hush settled. They all understood that if silver of this quantity remained buried under the church, it could be worth a small fortune. That kind of money was enough to attract dangerous opportunists. Mayor Drake let out a heavy sigh. If that's true, the Dark Tempest MC won't rest until they get it, which means this town is in for a fight unless we can safeguard or remove whatever is down there. He glanced around, his gaze lingering on Father Riker. We can't exactly dig it up quietly, and if we do, we risk toppling the church's foundation or letting them see we're onto something. Father Riker held up a hand. Let's not jump to demolition. This is still a house of worship, and we don't even know the structural integrity of what's sealed beneath. If we start poking around without a plan, we might do more harm than good. Officer Cross cleared his throat. What if we set a trap? We know they're searching for an entrance. We could position ourselves in the basement, wait for them to make a move, and catch them red-handed. Deputy Redwood, who had been quietly running mental scenarios, frowned. That's risky. We'd be in close quarters, potentially outnumbered. And if they suspect a setup, they might retaliate against the whole town. We don't have enough manpower to fight a small army of well-trained bikers. Silence fell once more as the group wrestled with the complexity of the situation. If they did nothing, the MC would eventually uncover the vault and possibly tear down the church in the process. If they took proactive measures, they risked lighting the fuse on a confrontation that could bring gunfire and destruction to the streets. Finally, de Thornfield spoke up, her voice quiet yet steady. What if we get help from Father Riker's old contacts? I know he served in the military. Maybe there are people he knows who could assist off the official grid. Eyes turned toward Father Riker, whose jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His past connections to Delta Force were not a casual resource he could simply dial up. But neither could he deny that the next steps might require specialized support that went beyond local law enforcement. Looking around, he realized that the weight of the town's future rested, in large part, on whatever he chose to do next. That night, Father Riker lingered inside his rectory office long after the others had gone. The rain had returned, pattering against the window panes in a rhythmic hush that underscored his solitude. In front of him lay a small satellite phone, a relic from his military days, something he'd kept locked away much like the sidearm he'd reluctantly retrieved. In his Delta Force years, Father Riker had established contact with people who specialized in covert operations and crisis management. They weren't mercenaries. Many were old squad mates or friends who had shifted into private security or consultative roles. Reaching out to them would invite questions he wasn't eager to answer. It might also signal a level of escalation he hadn't yet committed to. But the reality was, the Dark Tempest MC wouldn't hesitate to bring the fight to Ravencross Valley if they believed it necessary. He flicked the phone on, the small screen glowing green in the dimly lit room. It took a minute to acquire a signal. His heart pounded with each passing second, torn between wanting a response and dreading one. Finally, he typed a short coded message to a single contact in the phone's sparse directory. Need advice. Urgent. Potential infiltration. He set the phone aside, staring at it as if it might lunge at him. With a sigh, he closed his eyes, letting the sound of raindrops soothe his fraught nerves. When the phone pinged softly a few minutes later, he nearly jumped. An incoming text read, "Understood. We'll call at 0600 hours." Exhaling, Father Riker powered down the phone. He felt a swirl of relief and apprehension. Reaching out to old contacts was a significant step, one that could signal the difference between peace and violent confrontation. As he locked the phone in his desk drawer, he sent a silent prayer upward, asking for divine guidance in the midst of such human complexities. Meanwhile, across the darkened streets of Ravencross Valley, the Dark Tempest MC was not idle. In the vacant lot behind an abandoned hardware store, a small group of bikers huddled under a tarp to shield themselves from the rain. Raptor stood in the center, a flashlight illuminating a set of photocopied papers. Avalanche and Wraith leaned in, their breath steaming in the damp air. This is all we could get from the local archives before Redwood started poking her nose around. Raptor muttered, running a finger down the page. It showed a partial survey of the land near St. Michael's Church. We're missing half the puzzle, but it's enough to confirm there's something valuable there. Some mention of a sealed chamber. Wraith nodded, his voice low. We'll need more precise intel. If we break through the wrong section, we risk caving in the structure. A collapse might destroy whatever we're after. We also need a fallback plan if the cops get too close. Avalanche cracked his knuckles, his towering form casting a menacing silhouette. I say we go in hard, intimidate the mayor, the priest, whoever else stands in our way. They'll talk or pay, one of the two. Raptor's scarred face twisted in a near sneer. I'd rather avoid a bloodbath. We want what's under that church, not a national manhunt on our asses. We apply pressure strategically. Hit their communications, isolate them, make them realize resistance is pointless. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the group and the wet asphalt beneath their feet. For a moment, it looked as though nature itself had cast them in stark, threatening relief. Then the sky went dark again, and the bikers continued their hushed discussion, planning how best to corner a small community that was increasingly ready to fight back. In that same hush of pre-dawn hours, both sides prepared for the next move. Father Riker, forging a connection to his old life, and Raptor, orchestrating a slow, methodical infiltration. Neither man knew just how explosive the confrontation could become once all their secrets were forced into the light. By early morning, the rain had subsided, leaving the streets damp and gleaming under a pale sunrise. Father Riker awoke at 5:30 a.m., unable to sleep any longer. He made a quick pot of coffee and sat at his desk, the satellite phone in front of him like an artifact from another reality. At precisely 6 a.m., it buzzed quietly, the screen flashing an unrecognized number, exactly as promised. Riker here, he answered, keeping his voice low. A familiar tone resonated through the speaker, gruff but tinged with genuine concern. Been a while, Cal. Got your message. Didn't expect to hear from you again after you traded fatigues for a collar. Father Riker allowed himself a small smile. The voice belonged to Gideon Clark, a former teammate who now worked in private threat assessment. They had shared heated deployments, moments that forged loyalty deeper than most people could comprehend. I wouldn't have reached out unless it was important, Riker said, quickly summarizing the situation. An organized biker gang with possible ex-military members, rumored hidden vaults beneath a church, in a town unprepared for a direct confrontation. Gideon whistled softly on the other end. That's a lot for a quiet parish, Father. You need me to mobilize a team? Riker hesitated. I don't want to escalate if I can avoid it. I just need advice on how to position law enforcement and volunteers for maximum deterrence. Maybe an external consultant who can come in quietly, train a few of us on defensive measures and leave. I'm not looking to start a war. Gideon paused, the line crackling. Understood. I know a guy who specializes in low-visibility security for small communities. He's ex-Ranger, used to handle crisis intervention in remote areas. Could be perfect for your situation. But if things go sideways, you may need heavier support. A tension headache threatened as Father Riker absorbed Gideon's words. Let's start with the basics. If they push us too far, we'll reevaluate. The last thing I want is an armed showdown in the middle of a peaceful town. They exchanged more details. Gideon promised to make a few calls, see if he could arrange discreet help. Before signing off, he added, "You watch your back, Riker. If they're as trained as you suspect, they'll be looking for your weak spots. Don't let that collar make you forget what you're capable of." The call ended, leaving Father Riker with a mix of relief and dread. He locked the phone away once more, drained the last of his coffee, and prepared to meet Deputy Redwood to share the latest developments. By 7 a.m., a subdued hustle had resumed in the town. People who had no choice but to maintain their livelihoods opened shop doors, arranged storefront displays, and tried to pretend life was normal. The Dark Tempest. MC, however, remained an ever-present shadow. Small packs of bikers roamed the streets, stopping at businesses for coffee or supplies, their leathers and patches turning heads wherever they went. Riker found Redwood at the police station, a modest building with 2 holding cells and a front desk that doubled as a lost and found repository. The deputy stood over a bulletin board tacked with photos of the bikers, including blow-ups of Raptor, Avalanche, Wraith, and others they had managed to identify. "What's on your mind?" Redwood asked, noticing the grim set of Father Riker's jaw. "I spoke to a contact from my old life. He's going to try sending someone who can help us with security planning." Father Riker kept his voice low, mindful of the single officer behind the front desk. "No big guns, just a consultant. But that might be enough to keep this from spiraling." Redwood nodded. "Good. We'll take all the help we can get. The county sheriff keeps saying they're stretched thin, and the state police are dealing with budget cuts. There's only so much official backup we can rely on." Father Riker exhaled. "Then we handle this ourselves as carefully as possible." His eyes drifted to a map pinned to the board, a simple aerial view of Ravencross Valley. "Let's start by shoring up key points: the church, Main Street shops, the diner, and the clinic. If they make a move, we need to respond fast." Redwood agreed, and they spent the next hour discussing a practical yet covert plan for neighborhood watches, rotating shifts, and emergency communication lines. In the back of Father Riker's mind, Gideon's warning echoed. A confrontation felt inevitable, and each passing day tightened the noose around Ravencross Valley. He prayed it would not end in violence, but if it did, he vowed the town would not stand alone or unprepared. Mid-morning brought an uneasy calm to the streets. Dark Tempest bikers appeared less frequently, perhaps resting or planning elsewhere. The community took the lull as a chance to fortify in their own subtle ways. Zephyr Castillo, for example, quietly replaced the glass windows of his diner with reinforced safety glass. On in Sunday, just in case. Dr. Thornfield reorganized her clinic's supply room, making certain that medical essentials were on hand if anything dire occurred. Parents drove their children to school, refusing to let them walk alone. In the church basement, Father Riker and Sister Vesper convened for another look at the cryptic ledgers and partial blueprints. The single fluorescent bulb flickered ominously overhead, casting jittery shadows on the walls. "I keep wondering," Sister Vesper said, tapping the ledger, "why the donations just stopped. Did something happen to the person providing the silver? Or did the church deliberately cut ties?" Father Riker gazed at a tattered page that listed sums of silver far exceeding typical parish donations. If the original builders were in cahoots with the miners, maybe they realized that storing too much treasure under a church could attract the wrong kind of attention. Or maybe they... He paused, hearing an unexpected sound from upstairs, a muffled thump, followed by soft footsteps. Exchanging a worried glance, they hurried to the basement stairs. As they approached the main level, they heard a frantic voice echoing through the nave. "Father Riker! Father Riker!" It was Willow Drake. She burst into the church, eyes wide, nearly colliding with them as they emerged from the stairwell. "They've taken him!" she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. Father Riker and Sister Vesper each placed a steadying hand on her shoulders. "Who's taken who?" "Slow down," Father Riker urged, heart pounding. Willow gulped down air. "The bikers, Dark Tempest. They cornered my dad near the municipal building. I saw them force him into a black SUV before speeding off. I tried to follow, but I couldn't catch up." A cold dread slammed into Father Riker. Kidnapping the mayor was a bold escalation. "Did you see which direction they went?" Willow shook her head, tears lining her eyes. They headed east, I think, but I lost them at the intersection near the lumberyard. Please, we have to get him back. Sister Vesper guided Willow toward a pew. Take a moment. Deputy Redwood needs to know immediately. Father Riker already had his phone out, calling Redwood's number. When she picked up, he relayed the situation in terse, urgent phrases. Redwood's response was equally tense. She and Officer Cross would begin a search right away, but with the roads branching out, the bikers could be anywhere. Willow looked up at Father Riker, her fear palpable. They want leverage, don't they? They're hoping to force the mayor to pay them, or else, God knows what they'll do. His mind spun through the possible outcomes. This was precisely the type of escalation he feared, except it was happening much sooner and more aggressively than expected. We'll do everything we can, he assured her, setting a hand on her shoulder. Deputy Redwood is mobilizing. We'll find him. Sister Vesper hurried to gather her wheeze. I'll go with Willow, see if we can retrace their path. Maybe there is a clue we missed, a torn piece of clothing, tire tracks, anything. Father Riker nodded, steeling himself. I'll coordinate with Redwood and Officer Cross, see if we can set up roadblocks or track the vehicle. We can't let them vanish with the mayor. Together they rushed out of the church, leaving behind the ledgers and blueprints that only hours ago seemed like the main focus. Now a more immediate crisis took precedence. The Dark Tempest MC had upped the stakes, making it clear they wouldn't hesitate to abduct town officials to ensure compliance. For Father Riker, the line between spiritual shepherd and tactical defender was blurring faster than ever before. The search for Mayor Drake commenced in a flurry of activity. Deputy Redwood and Officer Cross coordinated with Father Riker, Sister Vesper, and a handful of volunteers who knew the valley's back roads better than any GPS. They formed a makeshift convoy of vehicles, 2 patrol cars, Sister Vesper's small hatchback, and an old pickup driven by a rancher named Wyatt who wasn't afraid to confront trouble. Willow Drake rode with Sister Vesper, her hands shaking around her phone, desperate for any sign of her father. Small groups split off, scanning different routes that spooled outward from the town center. One group checked the old lumberyard and the gravel pit behind it. Another drove the winding mountain road toward the disused mining shafts. Father Riker and Redwood took the main highway east, eyes peeled for anything that could indicate the bikers' hideout. Clouds churned overhead, threatening another deluge. As they reached a stretch of empty road cutting through dense pine forest, Redwood slowed the patrol car. They might have turned off somewhere along here, she said, scouring the trees. The SUV could be hidden behind thick brush or an old logging road. Father Riker leaned forward, scanning the shoulder. He suddenly noticed fresh tire tracks veering onto a narrow dirt path almost hidden by foliage. Redwood braked hard, reversing back to the spot. Indeed, 2 parallel lines sank into the soft earth, leading into the forest. They parked by the roadside and got out. Redwood radioed the other search parties, alerting them to the potential lead, while Father Riker moved ahead cautiously. The path was rutted and winding, barely wide enough for a single vehicle. Brown needles from overhead pines lay scattered along the ground, muffling their footsteps. After a few hundred yards, the path opened into a small clearing, and there, parked haphazardly, was a black SUV matching Willow's description. No one appeared to be inside, but the driver's door was ajar, and footprints mixed with the imprint of motorcycle treads in the soft earth. Redwood, gun drawn, crept forward. Father Riker's heart pounded, adrenaline coursing through him. He kept a safe distance, lacking official authority to carry firearms openly, but he was ready to act if needed. The quiet that enveloped them felt unnatural, like the hush before a thunderclap. Then, a faint sound, a muffled voice. Redwood signaled for Father Riker to follow her behind a thick stand of pine trees. Moving quietly, they circled the clearing until they saw a smaller trail branching away. Voices grew clearer, low, threatening tones laced with curses. Risking a quick peek through the underbrush, they spotted 4 bikers standing around Mayor Drake, who was on his knees, hands bound behind his back. Raptor and Avalanche were among them, flanking Drake like wolves circling a wounded deer. Drake's face was pale, a cut above his eyebrow trickling blood. Raptor stepped closer to the mayor, speaking in a voice too low for Father Riker to catch every word, but the tone was unequivocally menacing. Redwood's grip on her sidearm tightened. She glanced at Father Riker, silently asking whether they should engage now or wait for backup. Father Riker's mind raced. Charging in could lead to a shootout. Waiting for the rest of their makeshift posse might risk Drake's life if the bikers decided to escalate. Before he could signal Redwood with a decision, Raptor yanked Drake to his feet, shoving him forward. That's when Redwood made the call. She emerged from the tree line, weapon drawn, voice strong. "Sheriff's Department, hands in the air!" Raptor and Avalanche whirled around, startled. The other two bikers reached for their guns. In the explosive second that followed, Father Riker stepped forward as well, arms raised in a stance that was not exactly that of a typical priest. In the glare of the overcast light, it became clear that the next few moments would decide Mayor Drake's fate, and possibly the fate of an entire town caught in the crosshairs of the Dark Tempest MC. The clearing in the forest fell silent for a split second, as if the air itself had forgotten to move. Deputy Phoenix Redwood stood at the tree line, her service pistol aimed at Raptor and Avalanche. Two more bikers flanked Mayor Tobias Drake, whose hands remained bound behind his back. Father Callahan Riker stood slightly off to Redwood's side, appearing calm but alert. In that moment, the hush was as tense as a taut wire. One abrupt move could send bullets flying. Raptor's scarred face hardened into a sneer, a reaction to Redwood's command for them to stand down. Avalanche, towering a head taller than the rest, momentarily froze, his own firearm only half raised. One of the other bikers, presumably less disciplined, was the first to break the stillness. He whipped out a handgun, pointing it toward Redwood. Immediately, Redwood's weapon pivoted in his direction. In that razor-edged instant, Father Riker did something that made Redwood's jaw tighten in surprise. He stepped forward with fluid speed and disarmed the nearest biker, catching the man's wrist and twisting it in a single practiced motion, learned in years of close-quarters combat training. The gun clattered to the dirt, discharging a single round that burrowed harmlessly into a tree trunk. Riker then angled his body between Redwood and the other threats, ensuring the deputy maintained a clear line of fire. For a moment, Raptor's eyes widened in startled recognition. This was no ordinary priest. Delta Force, or some version of it. He'd seen that kind of expertise only among top-tier operators. Understanding flashed between them, a silent acknowledgement that they were both men with specialized training. But Raptor recovered quickly. He let out a harsh bark of laughter that held more contempt than amusement, shifting his weight as though preparing for a full-blown firefight. Avalanche also reacted, lifting his gun in Redwood's direction. Mayor Drake was jerked sideways in the commotion, stumbling to keep his balance. Redwood barked a warning, "Drop your weapon!" But the giant biker didn't comply. In the same second, Redwood fired a shot into the ground near Avalanche's feet, a warning that kicked up a small cloud of dirt. Avalanche cursed and looked at Raptor, uncertain whether to escalate further. Riker, who had forced the disarmed biker to the ground, pivoted to see how Raptor would respond. The gang leader kept his pistol at his side, not quite aiming it, but not putting it away either. "You've got some nerve," he growled, addressing Father Riker, "hiding behind that collar when you're clearly something else." Father Riker didn't rise to the provocation. His posture remained defensive, feet angled for stability, eyes scanning for any sudden movements from the gang. "Release the mayor," he demanded in a measured tone. "We don't want anyone hurt, but we won't stand by if you push us." Mayor Drake's eyes brimmed with desperation. He gasped, "These men, they're willing to kill if they don't get what they want." His voice quavered, but it carried enough urgency to underscore the seriousness of the standoff. Raptor exhaled heavily, clearly assessing the odds. They were outnumbered for now. Redwood, Riker, and soon, potentially, the rest of the search party would arrive. Still, he had 3 armed bikers on his side, and the forest provided ample cover if a shootout broke out. Lightning crackled somewhere in the distance, as though nature itself were poised to unleash more chaos. In the end, it was Redwood's unyielding aim that broke the impasse. She took a slow step forward, her gaze locked onto Raptor. "Last warning, let the mayor go and lay down your weapons." Her voice carried the hard resolve of someone who had faced down criminals before, though never a situation quite this precarious. Raptor scowled. He flicked a hand at Avalanche, who grunted and shoved Drake forward, letting him crash to his knees in the dirt. Then, with a deliberate slowness, Raptor bent to place his gun on the ground. The other bikers followed suit, albeit grudgingly. As Redwood and Riker inched closer, it felt as though the entire forest exhaled. The immediate threat had passed, but the crisis was far from over. Mayor Drake was alive, though shaken. 4 bikers had surrendered their guns, but 2 remained at large, deeper in the woods, or maybe circling back to town. Most importantly, the cat was out of the bag regarding Father Riker's past. There would be no more hiding the fact that he was more than just a priest. With weapons on the ground and the mayor freed, Redwood and Riker wasted no time securing the bikers. Redwood motioned for Drake to move aside, then instructed one of the town's volunteer searchers, a sturdy rancher named Wyatt, to gather the drop-in firearms. Father Riker stepped forward with a coil of nylon rope from Redwood's patrol car, quickly binding the disarmed biker's wrists. Raptor, Avalanche, and the other 2 gang members glowered as Redwood read them their rights. She was clearly aware that holding them might not last long. The county jail was small, and legal technicalities could see them released if bail was granted. But she had no choice. Arresting them was the only immediate course. Mayor Drake, trembling, pressed a hand to the cut on his forehead. "Thank God," he murmured, wincing. He turned to Father Riker, eyes brimming with gratitude and confusion. I thought you were just a priest," Father Riker finished softly, giving a slight nod. "Let's get you looked at. Dr. Thornfield should check that wound." He steadied the mayor by the arm. Across the clearing, Redwood asked for backup via her radio. "Officer Cross, come in. I've got 4 subjects in custody, including Raptor. Need immediate transport. Mayor Drake is safe." A burst of static, then Cross's voice crackled through, relief evident in his tone as he promised to send support right away. Raptor fixed Father Riker with a penetrating stare. "You think this ends with me in some county lockup?" His voice was low, almost conversational, yet laced with menace. "We're bigger than that. You haven't seen the half of what's coming." Father Riker met the biker's gaze. He recognized the conviction in Raptor's eyes, not merely bravado, but the unwavering assurance of someone who believed in a plan larger than just a single extortion scheme. "You've made your intentions clear by kidnapping a public official," Riker said, tone measured. "Don't expect much leniency." Avalanche spat onto the ground. "You got lucky. If we'd known we were dealing with a killer chaplain, we'd have set this up differently." Riker's jaw tightened at the label, but he said nothing. He was too preoccupied with how swiftly the situation had escalated. If the Dark Tempest MC had a well-coordinated network, jailing a handful of them might only spark further retaliation. Soon, more vehicles arrived, including Officer Cross, Sister Vesper, Willow Drake, and another volunteer. The clearing became a bustle of voices, shifting from panic to relieved. Willow ran to her father, wrapping her arms around him. Drake patted her back, tears lining his eyes in silent gratitude. In the swirl of the moment, of Redwood radioing for medical assistance, Cross starting to read the bikers their final rites, Sister Vesper checking on the mayor. Father Riker slipped to the edge of the clearing. He took a moment to collect himself under the pines. The shadows there cast long lines across the damp earth, reminders of how easily darkness could overtake a place unprepared for violence. He inhaled deeply, trying to ground himself. The old reflexes from Delta Force had kicked in almost automatically, as though no time had passed since his last mission. He was grateful to have saved Drake without bloodshed, but he knew it was only the beginning. The bigger storm had yet to break. Before he returned to the group, Redwood caught his eye. There was a question in her face, something about who he truly was. He offered a curt nod, silently promising they would talk, and she left it at that. The sense of unity in that makeshift search party was strong, each person playing a role to keep the mayor safe. Yet Father Riker couldn't shake the notion that the real battle lay ahead, hidden in the agendas of the Dark Tempest MC and the shadows beneath St. Michael's Church. By late afternoon, a temporary calm descended over Ravencross Valley, though the tension remained like a static charge in the air. The 4 arrested bikers were taken to the tiny county lockup, a building that had rarely housed more than a couple of public intoxication cases at a time. Deputy Redwood oversaw the booking process, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing unease that more bikers were out there, particularly Wraith and Cypher, who had been spotted but not apprehended. In the meantime, Mayor Drake, still shaken, insisted on returning to his office. He refused Dr. Thornfield's advice to stay overnight at the clinic for observation. "I need to reassure the town," he said, pressing an ice pack to the side of his head. "People need to see I'm still here, still functioning." Father Riker understood Drake's reasoning. Morale had become a precious commodity. If the mayor appeared broken or terrified, the community's collective hope would plummet. Nonetheless, Father Riker accompanied Drake back to the municipal building, determined to keep watch. Sister Vesper and Willow returned to the church to retrieve copies of the newly discovered documents, intending to review them more carefully that evening. On the surface, the afternoon passed quietly. Shops reopened, traffic resumed on Main Street, and a sense of normalcy tried to reassert itself. But beneath that veneer, families spoke in hushed tones about the kidnapping, about rumors that more violence might follow. Some whispered that maybe they should pay the bikers off. Others insisted that yielding would only worsen the crisis. Meanwhile, Redwood and Officer Cross took statements from the arrested bikers. The men offered little, sneering through questions or responding with cryptic hints of a larger plan. Raptor in particular seemed amused by the official procedures. When asked if the Dark Tempest MC had a local hideout, he only grinned. "We're everywhere," he said, leaning back in his metal chair. "And if you think locking me up changes anything, you're in for a rude awakening." Avalanche, for his part, hurled insults at Redwood until she threatened to double his charges for obstructing an investigation. Even then, he only quieted down to mutter ominous threats about reinforcements. "We've got more guys coming. You can't hold us all in this rinky-dink cage." Outside the station, a local crowd gathered. Some wanted to see the bikers with their own eyes. Others hovered out of curiosity or in hopes of gleaning any updates. Zephyr Castillo arrived with free coffee for the officers and volunteers, trying to project a sense of neighborly support. Dr. Thornfield stood by, offering first aid to those with minor scrapes or emotional distress from the chaotic day. Near sunset, Father Riker took a moment to call Gideon, the old comrade who had offered to dispatch a security consultant. Riker stepped around the corner of the station, trying to find a quiet spot away from prying ears. The phone rang twice before Gideon's voice came through, laced with static. "Heard about the arrests?" Gideon said immediately, without greeting. "News travels fast in the channels we watch. People are talking. Someone's spinning this as a sign the MC was sloppy." Father Riker bit his lip, scanning the street for onlookers. "Sloppy or not, they're dangerous. They took the mayor. We managed to get him back, but I doubt they'll stop. Any update on that consultant?" "Yeah," Gideon replied. "He's en route. Call sign Darius. Former ranger, good with rural crisis scenarios. He'll arrive tomorrow. Keep it low profile, though. He works best when folks don't see him coming." "You sure you're ready for this?" "I have no choice," Riker muttered. "Thanks, Gideon. Keep me posted on anything else you hear." After ending the call, Father Riker rejoined Redwood inside the station. A hush fell over the room when he entered, as though people sensed he was wrestling with weighty decisions. Redwood, who had stepped out of the interrogation room, caught his eye. "Everything all right?" she asked. He nodded, not quite ready to share details of the help on the way. "We'll see. Let's just say we might have some backup soon. For now, focus on controlling the fallout. We can't let the MC see any more cracks in this town's resolve." From the corner of the station's holding area, Raptor watched silently. A curious gleam in his eyes suggested he knew more than he let on. Father Riker noticed and felt a shiver of foreboding. Even behind bars, men like Raptor had ways of shaping events, especially if the rest of the Dark Tempest MC was mobilizing beyond the valley's horizon. As twilight surrendered to night, the tension in Ravencross Valley intensified. Far from the flickering streetlights of Main Street, a remote cabin lay tucked between towering pines. It was here that Wraith and Cypher, the two missing bikers, had chosen to regroup. They shared the space with a handful of other MC members who'd managed to evade the latest manhunt. Wraith stood by a small table, meticulously cleaning and reassembling a pistol. His movements were methodical, almost clinical, betraying his background in special operations. Cypher hunched over a laptop, tapping rapidly at keys, the glow of the screen reflecting on his narrow face. A mess of cables connected the device to a portable cell tower booster. "They locked up Raptor, Avalanche, and the others," Cypher said, not bothering to hide his frustration. And the mayor's rescue complicates everything. Our contact in the county clerk's office says there's talk of a hidden vault at the church, but no one can confirm the exact location. Wraith slid the pistol's barrel into place with a soft click. We need Raptor out, or we need to move without him. The reason we came here hasn't changed. That vault has something valuable, enough to fund the next phase. He paused, glancing at Cypher. What are the odds we can break them out before charges are formalized? Cypher shook his head. Small local jail, sure, but Redwood and her partner are on high alert. We'd face an immediate confrontation. Also, that priest is an unknown variable. The footage of him disarming one of our guys, someone leaked it online. People are calling him the Delta Chaplain. Not sure how much is rumor or truth. The mention of Father Riker's military proficiency made Wraith's gaze flicker with renewed interest. He'd recognized something in the priest's stance earlier, a certain economy of movement that spoke volumes about advanced combat training. If he's truly ex-Delta, that means we're dealing with a serious opponent. We can't afford more sloppy mistakes. Cypher nodded, frustration evident in every keystroke. I've tried jamming the town's communications, but Redwood switched to some backup frequency. They might have outside help on the way. He turned the laptop around, revealing a map with digital overlays. These are potential access points under the church. We'll need power tools, maybe even small charges to get through the stone, but it has to be done quietly. Ray studied the map. He recognized the layout from their earlier reconnaissance, but saw additional notations, details gleaned from records they'd bribed someone to obtain. This sub-level might be what we need, he said, pointing. If the town's too distracted, we could break in at night, retrieve what we need, and vanish before they realize what happened. A hint of doubt entered Cypher's expression. What about Raptor and the others in jail? We can't just leave them. Wraith exhaled, finishing the assembly of his weapon. Raptor's tough. He'll hold out. For the bigger plan, we need money. Whatever's hidden in that vault is the key. Once we secure it, we can decide how to handle our incarcerated brothers. He locked eyes with Cypher. We move soon, tomorrow night at the latest. The priest and Redwood won't see us coming if we choose our timing carefully. And if they do, well, he let the sentence trail off, leaving the threat of violence unspoken, yet unmistakable. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines, whispering secrets of storms yet to come. Wraith closed the laptop, ending the glow that had turned the cabin into a digital fortress. Together, he and Cypher prepared for a covert strike aimed directly at the heart of Ravencross Valley. The same unsuspecting church that Father Riker now guarded with every ounce of skill and faith he possessed. Morning dawned with a restless energy in Ravencross Valley. Father Riker left the rectory earlier than usual, a sense of urgency propelling him. He needed to prepare St. Michael's Church for whatever might come, especially after the revelations about hidden vaults and the Dark Tempest MC's probable intentions. He found Sister Vesper in the basement, where they had left the ledger copies and partial blueprints scattered on a work table. She was comparing the old diagrams, looking for any anomalies that might pinpoint a concealed entrance. I had trouble sleeping, she admitted, eyes shadowed by fatigue. I kept thinking about how easily they kidnapped the mayor. If they decide to come back, the church could be vulnerable. Father Riker placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. We'll reinforce this place as best we can. Our consultant should be arriving soon. I'm hoping he can help us do this quietly. He gestured to the diagram. Any luck finding the exact location of that vault? Sister Vesper shook her head. Not yet, but I noticed these old notes mention an annex on the south side. The official blueprint omits it. My guess is that's our sealed chamber. There's even a cryptic reference to reinforced stone, like someone intentionally built a barrier. Just then they heard footsteps echoing through the church. Father Riker stiffened, half expecting a repeat of the previous intrusion. Instead, Deputy Redwood's voice called out from above. Father? Sister Vesper? It's Maverski. They climbed the stairs and found Redwood accompanied by a broad-shouldered man with graying hair. He wore civilian clothes but carried himself with unmistakable military bearing. Redwood introduced him as Darius Cole, a security consultant who had just arrived. Father Riker offered a firm handshake, reading the subtle cues of his stance, the slight bend in the knees, the scanning of every corner. Darius was the real deal. "I hear you have quite the situation," Darius said, voice carrying the gravelly timbre of someone accustomed to commanding groups. "I'm here to help you strengthen your defenses. Low profile, if possible." Father Riker and Sister Vesper led him downstairs, explaining the backstory as they went. The rumored vault of silver hidden under the church, the bikers' presence, and the fragility of the town's resources. Redwood chimed in with details about the limited police force and the arrest of Raptor and a few others. Darius listened intently, asking occasional pointed questions. When they reached the basement, he examined the diagrams. "If they really want what's under here," he said, tapping the south side of the blueprint, "they might try a covert infiltration, especially now that half their leadership is in jail. Or they could go loud if they're desperate." Redwood shifted uncomfortably. "We'd prefer to avoid any firefight inside the church. But we also can't just stand by and let them raid it." Darius nodded. "We'll set up some hidden surveillance, maybe motion sensors in key spots. At night, we can do roving patrols around the perimeter. This basement might need some booby traps, or at least obstacles that slow them down if they breach it." Father Riker glanced at Sister Vesper, concern evident in his features. A place meant for worship was turning into something akin to a fortress. "I'll do what's necessary," he said slowly, "but no lethal traps. We don't want to kill anyone if we can help it." Darius's lips curved in a thin line of respect. "Understood. We'll focus on deterrence. Tasers, alarms, maybe harmless illusions that trick them into thinking we're better fortified than we are." He paused, then added, "That said, Father, you might want to keep your sidearm close. If they come in force, your community's safety could hinge on more than non-lethal measures." The statement hung in the still, musty air, a reminder of how dire the stakes had become. Father Riker said nothing for a moment, simply nodding. He'd already reconciled that possibility the night he retrieved his locked box. If push came to shove, he would protect his flock at any cost, even if it meant engaging in violence he had long hoped to leave behind. As word of Darius Cole's arrival circulated among the tight inner circle of town leaders, discreet preparations began. Darius worked with Redwood and Father Riker to identify weak points in St. Michael's architecture, placing small wireless cameras in corners and corridors that any intruder would have to pass. The cameras fed into a concealed monitor in the church office, accessible via tablet so Redwood and Officer Cross could keep watch remotely. Simultaneously, Sister Vesper coordinated with Dr. Thornfield and Willow Drake to discreetly gather supplies. The plan was to stockpile essentials in the church basement, in case families needed a safe shelter if chaos broke out. Blankets, bottled water, first aid kits. None of it was particularly suspicious, but it would prove invaluable if the Dark Tempest MC tried to lock down or terrorize the town. Mayor Drake, meanwhile, attempted to project an image of stability. He gave a public statement from the porch of the municipal building, acknowledging his recent kidnapping, but thanking local heroes for bringing him back safely. The mention of Father Riker did not include any reference to his combat skills, but the rumor mill had already done its work. Whispers abounded about the priest who disarmed a biker with a single martial arts move. Not all townspeople welcomed the idea of turning the church into a stronghold. A few older parishioners privately voiced discomfort, worried that arming themselves or setting up cameras would desecrate a sacred space. Father Riker understood their concerns. He shared them to a degree, but he also explained gently that such measures might be the only way to ensure the church remained a place of peace in the long term. Outside the church, locals began taking shifts as voluntary lookouts. One or two would perch in a parked car along the street, sipping coffee and keeping watch for unusual activity. Another might stroll around the building at dusk, feigning an evening walk but discreetly checking for any signs of forced entry. Deputy Redwood gave them basic guidelines. No confrontations, just immediate reporting of anything suspicious. In the local diner, Zephyr noticed a marked decrease in biker presence. Gone were the days of the MC's men sitting around, brazenly sipping coffee while glaring at patrons. With their leadership partially in jail and the rest presumably regrouping, they had gone underground, or up into the hills, as rumors suggested. That lull did not reassure Father Riker or Redwood. They'd both seen how quiet spells often preceded a larger strike. Darius Cole set up a modest command post in a small, vacant classroom next to the church's youth center. He pinned a map of the valley on the wall, marking probable infiltration routes with red thumbtacks. Each morning, Redwood and Officer Cross would update him on any new intel, and he'd adjust the plan accordingly. Sometimes Father Riker joined these briefings, offering knowledge of the church's layout and older passages that might not show up on modern schematics. One evening, as they finalized their daily security checks, Darius pulled Father Riker aside. "I've studied these men's tactics," he said quietly, scanning for eavesdroppers. "They're not an amateur biker gang. At least a few have backgrounds in private military contracting or special forces. That means they'll be systematic, patient, and dangerous." Father Riker met his gaze, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. He had faced well-trained adversaries before, from insurgent cells to rogue militias. But this was different. It was happening in the place he called home, among people he was pledged to guide spiritually. "We'll face them, won't," he said, voice friendly. "And we won't face them alone." Darius nodded. "All right, Father, then let's finish tightening our defenses. When they do come, we'll be ready for them." True to Wraith's word, the Dark Tempest MC didn't stay idle for long. 2 nights after Darius Cole arrived, a new wave of bikers rode into the outskirts of Ravencross Valley. Their engines growled along the winding roads, headlights cutting through the darkness. Locals reported seeing at least a dozen more riders than before, suggesting reinforcements had arrived in response to the arrests. The tension escalated further when multiple sightings came in of black-clad figures skulking near the old mining roads. Deputy Redwood dispatched Officer Cross to investigate, but he returned with little more than footprints and tire marks in the mud. "They're circling us," Cross told Redwood and Father Riker grimly at an emergency meeting in the church's side office, "testing the perimeter, looking for weaknesses." Meanwhile, Raptor and Avalanche, still behind bars, seemed smug during Redwood's routine checks. When Redwood demanded to know if they had more men inbound, Raptor merely flashed a crooked grin. "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe we're just getting started and you're already out of time." In the midst of these undercurrents, Father Riker walked the church grounds with Darius under a moonless sky, checking the newly installed motion sensor lights. The beams flared on at intervals, illuminating the church's stone walls and stained glass windows like silent sentinels. Shadows stretched across the grass, dancing with each sway of the pine branches overhead. "We'll keep the main entrance under lock," Darius explained, shining a flashlight across the door's reinforced hinges. "Side entrances have new deadbolts. The basement windows are boarded from inside. Our biggest threat is a stealth approach. If they realize we're guarded at ground level, they might try the roof or some old ventilation shaft." Father Riker frowned. "The roof is steep, but it's not impossible for a trained climber. Let's make sure that route is watched too." He paused, placing a hand on the church's aged stone. "I've never wanted to turn this place into a fortress, but I guess it's better than letting it crumble." Darius nodded sympathetically. "Fortress or not, it'll remain a beacon for the community. Trust me, sometimes walls are necessary to keep the peace intact." They finished their circuit and headed inside. Sister Vesper was waiting in the chapel, keeping an eye on a laptop feed connected to the cameras Darius had installed. Each small thumbnail displayed a corridor, a staircase, or a corner of the basement. Willow Drake sat beside her, arms folded across her chest as she watched for any movement. "Nothing unusual so far," Sister Vesper reported, glancing up at Father Riker. "Though the sensors near the sacristy door tripped once around midnight last night. We found no sign of forced entry this morning, so it could have been a small animal." Willow chewed her lip. "I'm more worried about a big animal. Human, that is. Wraith or Cypher, or some new face we haven't even seen yet." Father Riker gave them both a reassuring nod. "We're doing everything we can. Redwood has extra patrols around the clock. If they come, we'll be ready." Yet a knot of dread tightened in his gut. He recalled from his military experiences that even the best defenses could be circumvented by skilled, determined adversaries. The coming confrontation felt as inevitable as the changing seasons, though whether it would end in tragedy or deliverance was not yet clear. Outside, the quiet streets gave no hint of the tension coiled at the edges of the valley. But in the small hours of the night, more biker engines would rumble, more watchers would slip through the pines. Both sides were preparing. A reckoning loomed, and the time for covert intimidation was running out. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, the storm broke. It began not with thunder and lightning, but with a subtle flicker in one of the surveillance camera feeds that Willow had been monitoring from the church's small security station. She leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding, when she noticed the basement corridor camera blink off, then on again, showing static-laced images. Sister Vesper, who was standing behind Willow, grabbed her phone and alerted Father Riker and Darius. Within seconds, both men appeared, flanking Willow to peer at the screens. Motion sensor 3 went dark, Willow whispered, pointing to the top right corner of the monitor. Now it's back, but the feed is unstable. Darius took control of the laptop, quickly toggling through different camera angles. They could be using a signal jammer or physically tampering with the camera, he muttered. Check the hallway near the sacristy. Willow switched views. At first, the corridor appeared empty. Then in the corner of the screen, they glimpsed a faint shadow. It slid along the far wall, barely distinguishable from the dim surroundings. A moment later, the camera sputtered to static. Father Riker's adrenaline surged. He exchanged a grim look with Darius. They're here. Within 30 seconds, Redwood and Officer Cross arrived in response to Sister Vesper's warning text. Darius and Redwood conferred in low tones. They decided Redwood and Cross would guard the main and side entrances, while Father Riker and Darius investigated the basement. Sister Vesper and Willow would remain at the surveillance station, maintaining comms and contacting additional backup if shots were fired. Father Riker retrieved his personal sidearm from the rectory office. He slid a spare magazine into a pocket, the weight of the weapon a stark reminder of his old life. He found himself whispering a short prayer under his breath. Guide me to protect rather than destroy. He and Darius descended the narrow staircase leading to the basement, flashlights off to avoid giving away their approach. The tension was palpable in the stale air. Every step creaked on the old wooden stairs, but they moved as quietly as possible. At the bottom, they switched to a dim red filter on their flashlights, casting the corridor in a faint crimson glow. A muffled noise echoed from the direction of the sacristy storeroom, a scraping sound followed by a dull thud. Darius nodded toward Father Riker, then took point, sidearm held in a ready position. They proceeded slowly, hugging the wall. As they neared the storeroom door, another camera feed died on Willow's monitor upstairs. She relayed the info over text to Redwood, who signaled to Father Riker. The intruders might be heading deeper, possibly seeking a hidden passage. In the faint red light, Father Riker spotted fresh scratches on the stone floor, as if something heavy had been moved. He held up a hand, motioning for Darius to pause. Carefully, he edged closer to the storeroom entrance. The door was slightly ajar. Leaning in, he caught sight of figures in dark clothing, each wearing some variant of a biker cut without the usual patches. One was kneeling near the far wall, rummaging through what looked like masonry tools and a small battery-powered drill. Another stood guard, brandishing a compact SMG that glinted ominously. Father Riker felt his pulse hammer. It was no casual break-in. They'd come armed with real firepower and specialized gear. Exactly what Darius had warned them about. They're searching for the sealed vault, Riker realized, recalling the thick stone that had been rumored to hide something priceless. He and Darius exchanged a meaningful glance. If they attempted a direct assault, there would be gunfire in the church basement. Dangerous for everyone. But letting the intruders carve their way into the vault would only embolden them further. The decision had to be quick and measured. Quietly, Father Riker slipped out his phone and tapped a single message to Redwood. Intruders in storeroom, armed with SMG, prepare for confrontation. Then he lifted his sidearm, exhaled slowly, and prepared to do what was necessary to defend the church he'd vowed to protect. Darius signaled that he would move first, circling around to flank the armed biker, while Father Riker held a covering angle from the doorway. The corridor was dim, but adrenaline sharpened every sense. Riker could hear the faint hum of someone drilling into stone, the whine of the motor echoing through the storeroom. Taking a deep breath, Darius crept forward. He pressed against the wall just outside the doorway, inching closer until he was nearly behind the first intruder. The man crouched beside a metal case, presumably full of drilling or demolition tools. From Father Riker's vantage point, he could see the second intruder standing guard, the SMG cradled in both hands. In a synchronized motion, Darius lunged, grabbing the crouching biker and twisting his arm behind him in a quick lock. The man let out a startled cry, sending tools clattering. Simultaneously, Father Riker stepped into the doorway, gun aimed at the guard with the SMG. "Drop your weapon," Father Riker commanded, voice echoing off the stone walls. The guard hesitated, pivoting to raise his SMG, but Riker was a fraction of a second faster. He fired a single shot that whizzed just past the guard's shoulder, intentionally off target, but close enough to singe the fabric of his vest. The guard froze, eyes wide, then reluctantly let the SMG clatter to the ground. Meanwhile, Darius wrestled the first biker to the floor. The man tried to reach for a knife at his belt, but Darius pinned his wrist. "Stay down," he growled, yanking away the blade and tossing it aside. A third figure emerged from the deeper shadows, a lithe silhouette that Father Riker recognized as Wraith, the ex-military biker they'd been warned about. Wraith moved in a blur, hooking one arm around Darius's neck in an attempt to free his comrade. Darius grunted, shifting his stance to avoid a chokehold. But Wraith's speed caught him off guard. Father Riker reacted instantly, leveling his weapon at Wraith. "Don't move," he barked, but Wraith showed no sign of surrender. Instead, he twisted, using Darius as a partial shield while he reached inside his own jacket. Before Wraith could draw a weapon, Redwood's voice rang out from behind him. "Freeze!" She and Officer Cross had arrived, firearms trained on Wraith's back. Sister Vesper and Willow hung back in the corridor, ready to call for medical help or additional backup. For a split second, Wraith seemed to consider going for it anyway. His grip on Darius slackened just enough for Darius to slam an elbow back into Wraith's ribs. Wraith let out a ragged breath and staggered. Redwood pounced, knocking him off balance and disarming him of a compact pistol he'd managed to half withdraw. With both hands raised, Wraith spat a curse. He shot Father Riker a look that dripped with disdain. "Should have known you'd bring in more muscle. You're not the only one with the past," he sneered, glancing at Redwood. "You move like you've done this before, deputy." Redwood ignored the jibe, ordering Cross to cuff Wraith and the other two bikers. The corridor erupted in a flurry of motion, metal handcuffs clicking, debris from the scattered tools crunching underfoot, and the heavy breathing of all involved. Once they were secured, Redwood radioed in, her voice calm but urgent. "We've got 3 suspects in custody, including Wraith, undetermined if there are more in the church." She paused, scanning the storeroom's recesses. "Looks like they were attempting to breach a sealed wall." Darius picked up the battered drill from the floor, noting the fresh dust caked on its tip. "They've already made a dent," he observed grimly, shining his flashlight on a section of wall pockmarked by drill holes. "It's thicker than standard basement stone. There's something behind it." Father Riker stepped closer, a mix of relief and alarm washing over him. Relieved that they'd stopped the immediate threat without casualties, alarmed that the bikers had gotten this far. Sister Vesper joined them, her hand flying to her mouth when she saw the damage to the wall. "They found it," she whispered, realizing the significance. The vault, or whatever was hidden behind these stones. Wraith, handcuffed and kneeling, let out a humorless laugh. "You think you stopped us? We're just the tip of the spear. More of us are out there. Maybe not in this church, but close enough. And if we can't retrieve that treasure, someone else will." His words lingered in the stagnant air, a promise that the Dark Tempest MC's determination to uncover the church's secrets was far from extinguished. Even in defeat, they held on to the conviction that a vast prize lay buried beneath St. Michael's, a treasure worth risking everything for. Darius signaled that he would move first, circling around to flank the armed biker, while Father Riker held a covering angle from the doorway. The corridor was dim, but adrenaline sharpened every sense. Riker could hear the faint hum of someone drilling into stone, the whine of the motor echoing through the storeroom. Taking a deep breath, Darius crept forward. He pressed against the wall just outside the doorway, inching closer until he was nearly behind the first intruder. The man crouched beside a metal case, presumably full of drilling or demolition tools. From Father Riker's vantage point, he could see the second intruder standing guard, the SMG cradled in both hands. In a synchronized motion, Darius lunged, grabbing the crouching biker and twisting his arm behind him in a quick lock. The man let out a startled cry, sending tools clattering. Simultaneously, Father Riker stepped into the doorway, gun aimed at the guard with the SMG. "Drop your weapon," Father Riker commanded, voice echoing off the stone walls. The guard hesitated, pivoting to raise his SMG, but Riker was a fraction of a second faster. He fired a single shot that whizzed just past the guard's shoulder, intentionally off target, but close enough to singe the fabric of his vest. The guard froze, eyes wide, then reluctantly let the SMG clatter to the ground. Meanwhile, Darius wrestled the first biker to the floor. The man tried to reach for a knife at his belt, but Darius pinned his wrist. "Stay down," he growled, yanking away the blade and tossing it aside. A third figure emerged from the deeper shadows, a lithe silhouette that Father Riker recognized as Wraith, the ex-military biker they'd been warned about. Wraith moved in a blur, hooking one arm around Darius's neck in an attempt to free his comrade. Darius grunted, shifting his stance to avoid a chokehold, but Wraith's speed caught him off guard. Father Riker reacted instantly, leveling his weapon at Wraith. "Don't move," he barked, but Wraith showed no sign of surrender. Instead, he twisted, using Darius as a partial shield while he reached inside his own jacket. Before Wraith could draw a weapon, Redwood's voice rang out from behind him. "Freeze!" She and Officer Cross had arrived, firearms trained on Wraith's back. Sister Vesper and Willow hung back in the corridor, ready to call for medical help or additional backup. For a split second, Wraith seemed to consider going for it anyway. His grip on Darius slackened just enough for Darius to slam an elbow back into Wraith's ribs. Wraith let out a ragged breath and staggered. Redwood pounced, knocking him off balance and disarming him of a compact pistol he'd managed to half withdraw. With both hands raised, Wraith spat a curse. He shot Father Chister a look that dripped with disdain. "Should have known you'd bring in more muscle. You're not the only one with a past," he sneered, glancing at Redwood. "You move like you've done this before, Deputy." Redwood ignored the jibe, ordering Cross to cuff Wraith and the other two bikers. The corridor erupted in a flurry of motion, metal handcuffs clicking, debris from the scattered tools crunching underfoot, and the heavy breathing of all involved. Once they were secured, Redwood radioed in, her voice calm but urgent. "We've got 3 suspects in custody, including Wraith, undetermined if there are more in the church." She paused, scanning the storeroom's recesses. "Looks like they were attempting to breach a sealed wall." Darius picked up the battered drill from the floor, noting the fresh dust caked on its tip. "They've already made a dent," he observed grimly, shining his flashlight on a section of wall pockmarked by drill holes. "It's thicker than standard basement stone. There is something behind it." Father Riker stepped closer, a mix of relief and alarm washing over him. Relieved that they'd stopped the immediate threat without casualties, alarmed that the bikers had gotten this far. Sister Vesper joined them, her hand flying to her mouth when she saw the damage to the wall. "They found it," she whispered, realizing the significance. "The vault, or whatever was hidden behind these stones." Wraith, handcuffed and kneeling, let out a humorless laugh. "You think you stopped us? We're just the tip of the spear. More of us are out there. Maybe not in this church, but close enough. And if we can't retrieve that treasure, someone else will." His words lingered in the stagnant air, a promise that the Dark Tempest MC's determination to uncover the church's secrets was far from extinguished. Even in defeat, they held on to the conviction that a vast prize lay buried beneath St. Michael's, a treasure worth risking everything for. The aftermath of the attempted break-in rippled through Ravencross Valley like a shockwave. By dawn, news had spread that another group of bikers was caught trying to chisel into the church's foundations. Whispers of a vault of silver escalated into fervent speculation. Some townspeople wondered if they should dig it up themselves and hand it over to the authorities, simply to remove the MC's incentive. Others argued that giving in to criminals, whether in the form of paying protection fees or handing over possible treasures, would only embolden further violence. Mayor Drake, bruised but more resolute since his kidnapping, convened an emergency town hall meeting. It took place in the church's main nave, ironically the very spot the bikers had tried to subvert from below. The pews filled with residents wearing anxious expressions, each grappling with fear and determination. Standing at the front, Drake looked out over the gathering. His bandaged forehead bore testimony to the danger they faced. "Friends," he began, voice echoing in the vaulted space, "we're under siege by a group that believes our church holds something valuable enough to kill for. Whether or not that treasure exists, we cannot allow them to destroy our community." Deputy Redwood in uniform stepped forward. "We have multiple MC members in custody. We're collaborating with county and state authorities to keep them behind bars. But we also have credible intelligence that more are out there, possibly more arriving." She left unspoken the troubling implication. The MC might attempt a full-scale retaliation. A murmur of unease rippled through the crowd. Zephyr Castillo, the diner owner, stood up. "What if we find the vault and turn it over? At least that takes away their reason to be here." An older rancher named Wyatt, arms folded across a barrel chest, shook his head. "We do that. We give these thugs a roadmap to keep doing this elsewhere. No, we make a stand." Dr. Thornfield rose next, her calm demeanor holding a trace of nervousness. "No one wants more violence, but we have children and elders who can't defend themselves. Is there a way to relocate them, even temporarily?" Sister Vesper lifted her hand. "Father Riker has been working with a security consultant. We've fortified the church and set up measures to protect key areas, including the clinic. If families feel unsafe, we can shelter them here during nights. The basement might serve as a refuge if an all-out attack occurs." Father Riker, standing near the altar steps, finally spoke. "No one is forced to stay," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority. "If you have relatives in the next county and want to leave until this passes, we understand. But for those who remain, we will stand together." The Dark Tempest, MC, thrives on fear. If we remain united, we deny them that power. A collective hush settled over the pews. Some townspeople glanced at each other, as if measuring mutual resolve. Others stared at the floor, uncertain. Eventually, Willow Drake stepped forward. "I'm staying," she said. "I won't let them drive us out of our own town." Her words seemed to galvanize others. One by one, individuals voiced their willingness to defend Ravencross Valley, not with vigilante violence, but with a network of cooperation, watchfulness, and faith. "We have a plan," Redwood assured the assembly. "Around-the-clock watch, safe zones, and immediate alerts if suspicious activity is spotted. Officer Cross and I will coordinate with out-of-town agencies to keep reinforcements at the ready." Mayor Drake nodded, exhaling slowly. "Then let it be known, we do not bow to intimidation. We will protect our homes, our families, and our church. If the MC thinks we're meek, they'll be in for a surprise." A round of subdued applause rose, a far cry from rousing celebration, but a testament to the community's unity. Father Riker felt both pride and apprehension. He recognized the courage in these people, but also understood how swiftly unity could shatter if confronted with brutal force. As the meeting adjourned, day's first light shone through the stained glass windows, painting the congregation in vibrant colors that belied the grim reality outside. A showdown loomed, and now it was out in the open. Ravencross Valley would not cower, nor would it run. They would stand, guided by an ex-Delta Force priest, a resolute deputy, and a collective faith that refusing to bow might just see them through the coming storm. Looking back on everything that happened, from the tense standoffs and desperate rescues to the final revelations beneath St. Michael's Church, it's clear Ravencross Valley stood not only against a dangerous gang, but also against centuries of fear and hidden truths. In the end, it wasn't just Father Riker's combat skills or the deputy's tenacity that won. It was the unity of a whole community refusing to bow to intimidation. Their bond turned suspicion into trust and chaos into a shared triumph. From a personal perspective, this story reaffirms how even the darkest challenges can be overcome when good people band together with faith, resilience, and a willingness to protect what truly matters. We'd love to hear your thoughts, theories, and favorite moments. Comment below to share your insights and help us keep this conversation going.